What if everything you've ever trusted, everything you thought was safe for your children, was actually harmful? It all started on an ordinary day in Silicon Valley, a place where innovation and technology collide with our daily lives. Elon Musk sat across from a colleague, a scientist who had once worked for NASA, his face blank as the man across the table delivered a devastating bombshell. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? There's a problem with everything your kids are using right now. The toys, the clothes, the food containers. It's all made from things that could harm them in the long run, the scientist said, his voice low but firm. You're raising your children in a world full of dangers you don't even know about. Elon's mind raced as he processed the words. It wasn't the first time he had heard concerns about the environment or the safety of consumer products. After all, he had built rockets, electric cars, and solar panels, all to protect the planet. But this was personal. This was about his children. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized. If the things we buy for our children are harming them, then everything he had worked for, the future of humanity, was at risk. He turned to his colleague, his tone sharp. Tell me everything. What do we really know about the things we're giving our kids? The scientist leaned forward, his eyes full of conviction. There's a hidden truth about consumer products, Elon. You see, manufacturers are more concerned about profit than your child's health. They use materials that are toxic, substances that have been proven to cause harm over time. Some of them are right under our noses, but we're so used to them that we don't even question it. That moment marked the beginning of a journey, one that would shake Elon to his core, challenging everything he thought he knew about the world and his own responsibilities. But it also sparked something else, something that had always driven him in every venture he'd undertaken. A challenge, a call to action. This is not just about safety. It's about the future, Elon thought as he left the meeting. I need to do something about this, and it needs to happen now. But before he could take action, there was one thing he needed to know. What are these dangerous products? And more importantly, why isn't anyone talking about it? As Elon drove back to his office, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a comment on one of his social media posts. The user had left a simple but chilling message. You will stop buying these things for your children. The truth about what they're made of is worse than you can imagine. He stared at the screen, curiosity gnawing at him. The comment felt like an omen, one that demanded he dig deeper. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? He typed in response, trying to draw more attention to the growing mystery. The stage was set. A powerful force had been unleashed, and Musk's mind was racing with the possibilities. He didn't know where this would lead or what he would uncover, but one thing was certain. The world as he knew it was about to change. And with that, Elon Musk began his mission to uncover the hidden dangers of the products we trust the most, and to make sure no parent, no child, would ever be the same again. Elon Musk's life had never been anything but unconventional. Born in South Africa, he grew up in a world where he constantly felt the need to prove himself. At a young age, he had been captivated by technology, spending countless hours reading books on computers, physics, and space travel. But beyond his intellectual curiosity, there was a deeper drive that seemed to shape him. An obsession with solving big problems and creating a future that could be better than the present. He often described his childhood as lonely. His parents had divorced when he was young, and he spent much of his time lost in his own mind, sketching out designs for inventions and writing codes for software. By the age of 12, he had created and sold his first video game, Blaster, for a few $100s, an early sign of the entrepreneurial spirit that would come to define him. After moving to Canada to attend Queen's University and later transferring to the University of Pennsylvania in the U.S., Musk embarked on his path toward transforming the world. From Zip2 to PayPal, then to SpaceX, Tesla, and SolarCity, he built an empire founded on innovation, often tackling projects that most others would deem impossible. Musk didn't just want to create products. He wanted to reinvent entire industries, pushing boundaries no one thought could be pushed. But throughout his meteoric rise, there was always something personal at stake. While he revolutionized the world of technology, space exploration, and clean energy, he also wrestled with something deeply personal: his role as a father. He had 5 children with his first wife, Justine Musk, and later became a father of 6 with his second wife, Tallulah Riley. His relationship with his children wasn't like that of most busy executives. Elon Musk wasn't just a businessman, he was a hands-on dad. He spent time with his kids, took them on trips to SpaceX, and often involved them in his work. He would tell them about Mars and the stars, about the future he was building. His children were not just a part of his life. They were his inspiration. But even with his deep commitment to his family, Musk had begun to notice a strange sense of unease in recent years. He had always trusted the products on the market. After all, if something was available for sale, it had to be safe, right? That belief had been shattered during his conversation with the scientist earlier. The reality was more troubling than anything he could have imagined. Musk wasn't used to being blindsided by the unknown. He prided himself on understanding the world in ways few others could. Whether it was rocket science or electric cars, Musk was always the person who saw what others couldn't. But this new revelation, about the products he and countless other parents trusted for their children, was different. He could already feel the pressure mounting. The world wasn't ready for the truth, and he wasn't sure anyone could handle it. But he knew one thing for sure: if he didn't take this on, no one would. And he couldn't live with himself if he didn't at least try. The problem, however, was bigger than he anticipated. Elon spent the next few days researching consumer products, diving deep into scientific studies, and talking to experts in materials science, health, and toxicology. What he found was shocking. Products labeled as safe were actually full of harmful chemicals, and many of these chemicals were particularly dangerous for children. From BPA in plastics to flame retardants in furniture, and even lead in toys. Everywhere he looked, there were alarming signs that something was deeply wrong. But what bothered him even more was the fact that this information wasn't common knowledge. Why wasn't anyone talking about it? As a father, he couldn't accept the idea of his children using products that were potentially harming them. But as an entrepreneur and innovator, he saw this as an opportunity to do what he did best: fix the problem. He could see the future in his mind's eye. A world where products were not only efficient and innovative, but also safe and sustainable. Musk could practically feel the solutions he would create. But the question remained: how would he expose these hidden dangers to the world? Elon decided to take his first step in the mission. He needed to talk to other parents. He reached out to his closest friends and colleagues, many of whom were parents themselves, and invited them to a private dinner at his home. He didn't want to make this a formal presentation. He didn't want them to feel like they were being sold something. He simply needed to know: were they aware of the dangers lurking in everyday products? At dinner, the conversation quickly turned to the topic of children. Most of his friends were aware of general health concerns like processed foods or the environment, but none of them seemed to know about the specific dangers in toys, clothing, and household items. "What's going on, Elon?" one of his friends asked, sensing that something serious was on his mind. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the table as he gathered his thoughts. "Have you ever stopped to think about what your kids are using? What's really in those products they play with, eat off of, and wear?" The group went quiet. "I'm talking about the stuff you buy for them, thinking it's safe. The plastics, the fabrics, the chemicals in the toys. These things, these everyday things, are filled with substances that are harmful," Elon said, his voice firm. His friends looked at him, surprised, skeptical even. "Come on, Elon. You're telling me that the toys and products we buy for our kids are dangerous?" Musk nodded. "Yes. It's worse than you think. There's BPA, phthalates, lead, flame retardants, all sorts of chemicals and things you wouldn't expect. I've been digging into this, and what I found is disturbing. It's time to raise awareness." The room grew heavy with the weight of his words. His friends exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. This was more than just a casual dinner conversation. It was the beginning of something much larger. Elon was already planning the next steps: research, mobilizing the right experts, and building a campaign that could change the narrative on what was safe for children. He knew it would be difficult. He knew the pushback would be strong. But the truth was out there. And now, he was determined to bring it to light, no matter the cost. The more Elon Musk delved into the research, the more his unease grew. What started as a simple inquiry into the safety of children's products soon escalated into something far more disturbing. Every day, he uncovered new information that confirmed his worst fears. The products parents trusted for their children weren't just filled with toxic chemicals, they were often laced with substances that could cause lasting harm over a lifetime. By the end of the week, Elon was obsessively compiling a list of the top 10 most dangerous products on the market. He couldn't stop thinking about it. Every toy, every lunchbox, every bottle and blanket his children had ever used. Were they unknowingly putting their health at risk? The first product on his list was one that shocked him the most: plastic baby bottles. The compound bisphenol A, BPA, had been used in the manufacturing of plastic for decades. It was in countless products, including toys, water bottles, and, most alarmingly, baby bottles. Musk had seen many of these bottles in his own home, for his younger children, and the idea that they could be leaching harmful chemicals into his kids' bodies made his stomach churn. BPA disrupts the endocrine system, he thought, recalling the studies he had read. It can cause reproductive issues, developmental problems, even increase the risk of cancer in the long term. It was a hidden toxin in something as simple as a plastic bottle, a product that every parent assumed was safe. But it didn't stop there. Next on the list were flame retardants, chemicals that were widely used in furniture, mattresses, and even children's clothing. These chemicals were added to reduce the flammability of materials, but their safety was highly questionable. Studies had shown that many flame retardants could interfere with brain development, lead to hormonal imbalances, and increase the risk of certain cancers. Musk knew these chemicals were commonly found in children's pajamas and car seats, two things he had purchased for his kids in the past. The more Elon dug, the more he realized that these issues were systemic. Phthalates, chemicals used in everything from vinyl flooring to cosmetics, were linked to hormone disruption, asthma, and developmental delays. Lead, a heavy metal known for its toxicity, was still present in many imported toys. Even products labeled eco-friendly or organic often contained hidden dangers. As Musk spent more time piecing together these unsettling discoveries, he began to see a larger, more troubling pattern. The global consumer industry was built on a web of companies that prioritized profit over safety, often at the expense of children's health. Manufacturers knew about the risks, but the drive for market share and cost reduction outweighed the responsibility to protect consumers. It was the kind of issue Musk had faced before in his career, one that seemed impossible to solve at first, yet one that demanded attention. He had confronted impossible odds in space exploration, renewable energy, and electric vehicles. Now, he was facing a new challenge: how to take down a system that allowed dangerous chemicals to flood the market unchecked. Elon's research continued into the early hours of the morning. But even as he uncovered more facts and became increasingly alarmed, he knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't just sit on this information. It was a moral imperative. As a parent, a businessman, and an innovator, he had a responsibility to protect children. Not just his own, but all children. He called a meeting with his closest advisors, the same group that had helped him with SpaceX and Tesla. They gathered in a small conference room at the Tesla headquarters, and for the first time in a long while, the atmosphere was not one of innovation and excitement, but one of deep concern. Elon wasn't there to talk about the next rocket launch or the future of electric cars. He was there to discuss something far more urgent: the safety of the next generation. "I've been researching something," Elon began, his tone grave. "It's something we need to address, urgently. The products that we use every day, the products we buy for our children, are filled with chemicals that are harmful in ways that most people don't even know." He paused for a moment, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. There's BPA in baby bottles. There are flame retardants in children's pajamas, lead in toys, phthalates in everyday products like shampoos and plastics. It's everywhere, and no one is talking about it. The room went silent. His advisors exchanged worried glances, and for a moment, it seemed like the enormity of the issue was too much to process. One of his engineers, Mark, spoke up. "But Elon, you're talking about an entire industry. If we start challenging every product, that's a massive undertaking. We could be stepping on the toes of some of the world's biggest companies." Elon nodded. acknowledging the gravity of the situation. I know, but that's exactly why it's time to do something about it. It's about making a stand. If we don't, no one will. The conversation turned from one of concern to action. Elon Musk had always been a man of bold ideas, but now, it seemed, he was preparing for his most daring move yet. He began sketching out a strategy: raise awareness, engage with experts, and expose the dangers of these products to the world. He knew it would take time, and it wouldn't be easy. But this was a battle that had to be fought, one that was bigger than any product launch or business acquisition. Elon's mind raced with ideas, and he began making a plan. First, he would need to assemble a team of scientists and environmental experts to help create safer alternatives. Second, he would need to partner with advocacy groups and influencers to help spread the word. And finally, he would need to go straight to the public, on social media, through documentaries, and in the media. He would challenge the very companies that were profiting off dangerous products. It was an ambitious plan. But if there was one thing Elon Musk understood, it was that ambition could move mountains. And in this case, the mountain was the truth. The days following the meeting were a blur of research, phone calls, and brainstorming sessions. Musk was determined to make an impact, and quickly. He reached out to top experts in fields ranging from environmental science to toxicology. He also began conversations with various advocacy groups who had been fighting for consumer safety for years, though most of them had made little headway in their efforts to change the industry. There was one organization in particular that caught Musk's attention: the Environmental Working Group, EWG, a nonprofit dedicated to exposing harmful chemicals in consumer products. They had done extensive research on the safety of household and personal care products, but their efforts had been largely ignored by the public and corporate giants alike. Musk reached out to their executive director, Heather White, who immediately recognized the significance of what he was proposing. The possibility of having someone with Musk's influence on their side was a game-changer. They agreed to partner together, with Musk's resources and platform giving the EWG a level of visibility they had never had before. The next move was clear. They would begin by exposing the 10 most dangerous products, starting with the ones that impacted children the most. Elon began planning a major public awareness campaign. The stakes were high. If the world learned about the dangers of these products, it could revolutionize the way consumers made purchasing decisions. But, as always, there was resistance. The companies that made these harmful products weren't about to let Elon's campaign go unchecked. Behind the scenes, they were already preparing to fight back. As the clock ticked down toward the launch of his campaign, Elon Musk knew one thing for sure: this battle was just beginning. The world was about to hear the truth, and it would hear it loud and clear. Elon Musk knew that the fight ahead was going to be difficult, but he also knew that it was one he had to win. There was too much at stake, not just for his own children but for every child on the planet. He had faced enormous challenges in his career, from landing rockets on barges in the middle of the ocean to reshaping the auto industry. But this was personal. The products that parents used to care for their children, products that were sold as safe and healthy, were, in fact, poisoning them. The thought made Elon furious. It also made him more determined than ever. With his team at Tesla and SpaceX already at his disposal, Elon began to focus on the task at hand: creating a comprehensive and strategic public campaign to expose the dangers of everyday products. But before anything could be done in the public eye, he needed to put together the right group of experts. If he was going to go after major corporations and expose their malpractices, he had to do so with solid, undeniable facts. His first call was to Heather White, the executive director of the Environmental Working Group, EWG, a nonprofit organization dedicated to environmental health and advocacy. Heather had long been a leading voice in the battle against toxic chemicals in consumer products, but her organization lacked the resources to take on the massive industry players who profited from those harmful substances. When Elon called her, she didn't hesitate. "Elon, we've been waiting for someone like you," Heather said, almost breathless on the other end of the phone. "We've been fighting for years, but we don't have the platform, the technology, or the influence to make real change. But with you on board, this could actually work. This could move mountains." Elon's eyes narrowed as he felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. He was ready to change the world once again. "We're going to take this fight to the people," Elon said, his voice calm but intense. We'll expose the truth about these products, one by one. We're not just going to educate parents. We're going to hold these companies accountable for what they've been doing to our kids. Heather's voice softened. I believe you, Elon. I believe we can do this. With Heather and the EWG on his side, Musk knew he could no longer wait. The public needed to know about these dangers, and they needed to know now. But there was one key element missing: the how. He called a meeting with his team at Tesla, his closest advisors who had helped him revolutionize the electric car industry and take SpaceX to unimaginable heights. As they gathered around the conference table, Elon wasted no time getting to the point. We need to start a campaign that will expose the top 10 most dangerous products for children, he said, his voice steady and unwavering. We need facts, proof, and a platform. This has to be big. We can't just rely on press releases or small ads. We need a viral movement that will reach millions of parents from all walks of life. One of his advisors, Mark, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Elon, do you realize how much resistance we're going to face? The companies that manufacture these products are giants. They have unlimited resources, lobbyists, and influence in the media. It's going to be an uphill battle. Elon didn't flinch. I'm used to uphill battles. Look at Tesla. Look at SpaceX. Look at everything we've done so far. Every time we've faced resistance, we've come out stronger. This is no different. Elon's words were like a spark, igniting a fire within the team. They knew he was right. They had done the impossible before, and they could do it again. With Elon leading the charge, they would expose the truth about these toxic products and, hopefully, force a global shift in how the world approached child safety. We'll start by gathering all the data we can, Elon continued. We need to understand the science behind these chemicals. We need to show the world that this isn't just speculation. This is backed by hard evidence. But we also need a voice. Someone who can reach millions of people with just a few words. It was then that the plan began to take shape. They would partner with media influencers, health experts, and activists to help spread the word. They would use every social media platform at their disposal, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, to share information, build awareness, and mobilize parents around the world. We need the public to stand with us, Elon said, his eyes glowing with intensity. We'll build a coalition of people who refuse to let their children continue to be exposed to these toxins. We'll show the world what's really in those products, and we'll demand change. The team quickly went to work. They gathered studies from the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and the World Health Organization, WHO, to build an irrefutable case against the most harmful chemicals in consumer products. They enlisted the help of independent researchers and toxicologists who could speak to the long-term effects of exposure to these chemicals. They even arranged for interviews with parents who had seen the effects firsthand, children with developmental delays, allergies, or chronic illnesses that could be traced back to chemical exposure. Meanwhile, Elon's own efforts were focused on creating a massive, high-profile public launch. He knew that he needed to use his own platform, which had millions of followers on Twitter and other social media sites, to build momentum. In his first tweet on the subject, he wrote, "There's a hidden truth about the products we trust for our children. What's really in those toys, bottles, and clothes? It's time to find out. Hashtag SafeKids, hashtag toxic products, hashtag expose the truth." It took only minutes for the tweet to go viral. Parents, health experts, and advocates began sharing it, sparking a massive conversation. People wanted answers, and they wanted them fast. As the momentum built, Elon began working with a production team to create a series of short documentaries that would air on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. The goal was simple: raise awareness, educate, and call people to action. The first documentary focused on baby bottles and BPA, a chemical that, despite being banned in some countries, was still used in many U.S. products. The video was heart-wrenching, showcasing personal stories from parents who had unknowingly exposed their children to BPA and now faced the consequences. The media storm that followed Elon's initial tweets and the launch of the first documentary was nothing short of explosive. Within days, news outlets from around the world were covering the growing controversy surrounding child products and the chemicals they contained. Elon appeared on several major news programs, from 60 Minutes to talk shows, explaining the dangers of BPA, phthalates, flame retardants, and other chemicals that were commonly used in everyday products. His straightforward, no-nonsense approach resonated with people, especially parents. "I didn't do this for publicity," Elon told one interviewer. "I did this because, as a father, I couldn't live with myself knowing that my children, and every other child, were at risk from something we take for granted as safe. This is bigger than business. This is about the future of our kids." As the public grew more aware, the companies that produced these dangerous products began to feel the pressure. Their stock prices began to fall. Their PR teams scrambled to respond to the growing backlash. Some companies issued vague statements claiming that they were working towards safer alternatives, but it was clear that the tide was turning. The challenge was far from over. But one thing was certain: Elon Musk was not going to back down. This was just the beginning of a much larger fight, and he was ready to lead it to the finish line. Elon Musk's tweet had done its job. It had ignited a wildfire. From that moment on, the world couldn't ignore what he was saying. The narrative had shifted, and parents across the globe were now demanding answers. What was in the products they trusted for their children? How had they been deceived for so long? By the time the first documentary aired, the media storm was in full force. News stations scrambled to cover the growing controversy, and interviews with Musk popped up across the major networks. The ripple effect was undeniable. People were no longer just questioning the safety of the products. They were mobilizing. Elon's phone didn't stop ringing. He had been inundated with messages from journalists, environmental advocates, and concerned parents. He knew the public was outraged, but what surprised him was the sheer volume of support pouring in from unexpected places. Environmental groups, health professionals, and even some large corporations, albeit quietly, began reaching out with offers to collaborate or share information. It was as if everyone had been waiting for a figure like Elon to take the lead. He was scheduled for an appearance on The Daily Show, one of the most influential late-night talk shows in the U.S., hosted by Trevor Noah. As he sat backstage waiting for his segment, Elon had a rare moment of reflection. The usual pressure he felt before an appearance was there, but it wasn't about product launches or innovations this time. It was about the safety of children, the future. Trevor Noah greeted him warmly as the segment began. "So, Elon," Trevor said with a grin, "you've shocked the world with some serious claims. You've been telling everyone that the products parents trust most for their kids are, well, basically poisoning them. How do you sleep at night knowing that you're dropping bombs like that?" Elon chuckled, but his eyes remained serious. "I don't sleep well when I know that companies are making billions off of products that are causing real harm to children. We're talking about things like BPA in baby bottles, lead in toys, and flame retardants in clothes. These aren't just ingredients in a recipe. These are chemicals that have been proven to disrupt hormones, impair brain development, and even increase the risk of cancer. And we're still letting them into the hands of our kids." Trevor leaned in, nodding. "So, what can parents do? How do they protect their kids if they can't trust what's on the shelf anymore?" Elon gave a slight, rueful smile. "It's not easy, Trevor. We've been sold a lie for decades. But the first step is awareness. If parents know what to look for, they can start making better choices. If they start demanding safer products, companies will listen. We can change the market if we fight for it." The segment went viral, and in the days that followed, hundreds of thousands of comments, posts, and messages flooded social media. Parents shared their stories of frustration and anger, asking how they could protect their children. They posted pictures of the baby bottles, pajamas, and toys they'd bought, and began asking if these products were safe or if they were unknowingly exposing their children to toxins. Elon's campaign had taken on a life of its own. #SafeKids and #ExposeTheTruth were trending on social media. Advocacy groups from around the world started hosting rallies and press conferences, with Elon Musk's name at the forefront of the movement. He received messages from activists in Europe, Asia, and even Africa, all of whom were eager to join the fight. But despite the groundswell of support, the backlash from the industry was swift and powerful. Major corporations that produced these dangerous products launched aggressive PR campaigns to undermine Elon's credibility. They downplayed the science, hired lobbyists, and filled the airwaves with rebuttals. One of the largest corporations in the industry, Global Tech, which produced everything from baby toys to furniture, issued a statement condemning Musk's campaign. The company's CEO, Jonathan Price, called Musk's accusations irresponsible and dangerous, claiming that there was no substantial evidence linking these chemicals to harm. "The science is clear," Price said in an interview on CNN. "BPA, phthalates, and other chemicals are safe in the quantities used in children's products. These sensationalist claims are misleading and cause unnecessary panic among parents." Elon watched the interview with a mixture of frustration and determination. Price was playing the game the way they always had, denying the truth, buying time, and counting on public ignorance to shield them. But Elon was no stranger to resistance. He had faced similar pushback from the auto and aerospace industries. He knew how to fight against Goliath-sized corporations that had a stranglehold on the market. But this battle felt different. It wasn't just about innovation or corporate competition. It was about the safety of children. He picked up the phone and called Heather White at the Environmental Working Group. "We need to hit them harder," he said, his voice low but firm. "We can't let them control the narrative. We need to expose them for what they are, profit-driven companies that will do anything to protect their bottom line, even if it means putting kids at risk. They're not just selling products, they're selling poison." Heather's voice was steady, even as she understood the gravity of Elon's words. "I agree. We'll get the data out there. We have studies, evidence, and testimonials. It's time to show the public what's really going on." The next step was clear. They would release a comprehensive report backed by years of research from environmental scientists, toxicologists, and child development experts. The report would debunk the claims made by the companies and expose the risks in their products. The timing was critical. Musk knew they needed to build the momentum, turn the media's attention on the companies that were making these harmful products, and demand accountability. The report was ready within a week. It wasn't just a scientific paper. It was a powerful expose that detailed how certain chemicals, BPA, phthalates, flame retardants, and lead, had been proven to harm children's health. It also highlighted how these chemicals had been hidden in products with false claims of safety, often downplayed by industry lobbyists and government agencies. "Here's the truth," Musk said in a tweet, sharing the link to the report. "We've known about the dangers for years, but the corporations didn't care. We can no longer let them get away with it. #SafeKids #expose the truth." The response was immediate. The report was shared by influencers, parents, activists, and journalists. It wasn't just being read, it was being talked about. Musk's campaign had reached new heights. What started as a fight against a handful of dangerous products had become a full-fledged battle against an entire industry. And Elon wasn't going to back down. The storm had officially broken. What had started as a social media campaign, a few pointed tweets, and a viral documentary was now a full-scale war. The corporate giants were on the defensive, and they had resources at their disposal that Elon Musk knew could easily drown out the truth. But he wasn't scared. He was resolute. This was about more than just profit margins and brand loyalty. It was about something far more important: children's lives. Elon's team at Tesla and SpaceX had already set up a task force of legal experts, communication strategists, and top-tier scientists, all working around the clock. Their mission was simple: expose the companies that were putting toxins in everyday products and hold them accountable. The data was irrefutable. The science was there. The problem was that the industry giants were masters of deception, and they had been doing this for years. One of the first and most vocal opponents was Global Tech, the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that dominated the children's product industry. They manufactured everything from diapers to bottles to car seats. They had lobbied for years to keep certain chemicals like BPA in the market, despite mounting evidence of its dangers. Their CEO, Jonathan Price, had already become a public figure during the initial media push. His statements had been dismissive, claiming that the campaign was based on misleading information and accusing Musk of using fear-mongering tactics to boost his brand. Price's rhetoric was calm, authoritative, and polished. But Elon was no stranger to powerful enemies, and this was a fight he was ready to finish. The corporate defense was predictable. Global Tech went on the offensive, pouring millions into television ads, sponsored articles, and social media campaigns to discredit Musk. They had hired a fleet of PR firms to spread the narrative that Elon's accusations were baseless. Their message was simple. Musk had no right to challenge the safety of their products, especially when so many parents had trusted their brand for decades. A slick commercial aired on primetime television, featuring a smiling mother holding a baby bottle with a clearly branded Global Tech logo. The voiceover proclaimed, "Our products have been trusted by millions of parents around the world. We use the highest standards to ensure your child's safety. You can rely on us, now and always." The media immediately picked up on the backlash, featuring interviews with global tech representatives, along with their assurances that their products had been rigorously tested and were completely safe. But Elon Musk wasn't backing down. He called for a live debate on television, offering to face Jonathan Price on any major news outlet or talk show. He wasn't looking to win an argument. He was looking to expose the truth. Price, sensing the pressure, agreed to the debate, but only on his terms. It would be moderated by a neutral party, and there would be no room for personal attacks. Musk agreed without hesitation. He was used to the spotlight. He was used to the scrutiny. And now, he was ready to dismantle global tech's defenses. The day of the debate arrived. The anticipation was palpable. It was being broadcast across multiple channels, live-streamed on social media, and watched by millions around the world. In one corner, there was Elon Musk, the brash innovator, unafraid to challenge the status quo. In the other, Jonathan Price, a smooth-talking CEO with decades of corporate experience. The debate began with Price speaking first, touting the supposed safety and regulatory standards that global tech's products adhered to. He spoke with calm confidence, using industry jargon to validate his position. But Musk wasn't impressed. "Elon, as you know," Price began, his voice calm but authoritative, "we take the health and safety of children seriously. Our products go through rigorous testing, and we follow all the regulations put forth by federal and international health organizations. This campaign by Mr. Musk, while well-meaning, is based on a very narrow understanding of complex science." Elon leaned forward, his gaze focused. He wasn't going to let Price dodge the key issue. He pointed to a large screen behind him, which displayed a graph of scientific studies linking BPA, phthalates, and other chemicals to developmental issues in children. "Jonathan, what you're saying is not true," Elon began, his voice steady but unwavering. "These studies, conducted by independent researchers, clearly show that these chemicals are harmful. The regulatory agencies you're relying on have been manipulated by lobbyists for years. And your company has known about the dangers of BPA for decades. Global Tech and other companies have continued to put these toxins in our children's products because it's cheaper to use them. The science doesn't lie." Price, momentarily caught off guard, attempted to steer the conversation back toward what he believed were the facts. But Musk wasn't letting up. "You talk about safety standards, Jonathan. But why is it that companies like yours fought against banning BPA, even when countries in Europe and Asia have already made those changes? Why is it that for years you've continued to sell these products in the US even when the evidence has been mounting? This isn't about safety. It's about profit. And the children are paying the price." The audience began to stir, murmurs of approval echoing in the crowd. Musk had landed his first blow, but the battle wasn't over yet. Price, knowing he was on the ropes, launched into a defense of the current regulatory system. He argued that the chemical industry was heavily regulated by the government and that companies like Global Tech were simply following the rules set by agencies like the FDA and EPA. Musk countered by pointing out that the system was broken. He cited instances where major chemical manufacturers had lobbied to keep dangerous substances in circulation, even when the science was clear. He pointed to how manufacturers had used exemptions to avoid regulation and how some substances, like flame retardants in children's pajamas, were still in widespread use despite being known carcinogens. As the debate wore on, it became increasingly clear that Price's calm and polished rhetoric was no match for the mounting evidence that Musk presented. But even more telling was the way the media began to cover the event. News outlets that had initially leaned toward Global Tech's defense began to turn, reporting on the contradictions in the company's statements. Journalists began highlighting the gaps in the corporate narrative, asking tough questions about the safety of the products. Social media exploded with comments from parents, activists, and everyday people who had been moved by Musk's words. In the final moments of the debate, Elon Musk delivered his closing statement, his tone solemn but resolute. The truth is, we're facing a crisis. These corporations have knowingly put children's lives at risk for profit. But the tide is turning. Parents are waking up. The truth will always come to light. And no amount of money or PR can hide that. The question is, will you choose to be on the right side of history? As the debate ended, the room was silent for a moment. Then, a round of applause broke out, first from a few, then from many. Musk had won the debate, not just in words, but in the hearts and minds of the audience. The roar of public opinion had shifted in Elon Musk's favor, but the war was far from over. It had become clear that the true power of the corporations wasn't just in their advertising budgets or their influence over the media. It was in their deep pockets and their ability to wage prolonged, expensive legal battles. Elon wasn't just facing a fight for safer products. He was now facing a legal war that would test the very foundation of the movement. The first step was to bring lawsuits against the companies involved, particularly global tech. Musk knew the legal system would be a slow grind, but it was a fight he was willing to undertake. To ensure the case had a fighting chance, he enlisted a team of the best environmental lawyers, child protection advocates, and toxicologists, each determined to expose the fraud that had allowed dangerous chemicals to be sold under the guise of safety. Elon sat at a long conference table in the newly set-up legal war room, flanked by his core team. Across from him was Rebecca Goldstein, a leading environmental lawyer who had spent the last decade taking on corporations like Global Tech. Her face was serious, and her fingers drummed nervously against a legal pad in front of her. "Elon, the truth is on our side," she said, looking up at him. "But this will be a marathon, not a sprint. Global Tech has the best legal minds money can buy. They'll try to delay, dismiss, and drag this out until they break us down." "I'm not worried about their tactics, Rebecca," Elon replied. "We've got the evidence. We've got the studies. We've got parents, scientists, and activists behind us. We're not just suing a company. We're taking on a system of corruption that's been poisoning children for decades." Rebecca nodded, though there was a trace of concern in her eyes. "The stakes are high. This won't just be a matter of getting a ruling in our favor. If we lose, they'll use it to undermine everything we've fought for. They'll claim the science doesn't support the case, and they'll bury the issue in bureaucracy." "We won't lose," Elon said firmly. "We just need to make sure we have everything in place to win the long game." The lawsuits were filed in multiple states, targeting Global Tech and other companies that had manufactured and distributed toxic products. Each complaint was carefully crafted, citing the research linking BPA, lead, phthalates, and flame retardants to various health issues, particularly in children. Musk knew they had a strong case on paper, but the real challenge would be getting it in front of a jury. Global Tech didn't wait long to respond. Within weeks, the corporation launched a counteroffensive, filing motions to have the lawsuits dismissed, claiming that the chemicals were legally approved and that their products had passed safety tests. Their defense was the same one they had used in the media. Regulations had cleared their products, and their customers had no reason to believe they were unsafe. In a public statement, Jonathan Price, CEO of Global Tech, continued to defend his company's track record. "Our products are subject to the strictest regulatory standards, both in the United States and internationally. There is no basis for these claims. These accusations are nothing more than a distraction, and we will vigorously defend ourselves in court." Elon wasn't surprised by the statement. He had expected nothing less. The corporate giants would always protect their bottom line, even if it meant sacrificing public health. But Musk wasn't just going to let them control the narrative. Behind the scenes, his legal team was preparing a counter-strategy. Instead of just focusing on the individual products, they would target the systemic flaws in the regulatory process that had allowed these chemicals to remain in children's products. They would show that the regulations themselves were outdated, flawed, and influenced by corporate lobbying. Rebecca and her team worked tirelessly to build a case that would expose how companies like Global Tech had misled the public by manufacturing products with known toxins while simultaneously convincing regulatory agencies to classify these products as safe. The media frenzy that surrounded the lawsuit was only escalating. Each new development was picked up by news outlets, and Musk's campaign had grown from a viral protest to a full-fledged movement. Parents, activists, and medical experts continued to rally behind him, with hashtags like #ToxicToys and #SafeKidsNow filling social media feeds. Yet, while the public was rallying for change, the real work was happening behind closed doors, in courtrooms and boardrooms. As the legal team prepared for the first trial, they knew this wouldn't be just a fight for monetary compensation. It was a battle for the future of child safety. Every document they submitted, every piece of evidence they gathered, was meticulously scrutinized. The goal wasn't just to win, it was to make sure that the system itself was forced to change. But global tech wasn't going down without a fight. They had deep connections with some of the most influential lobbyists in Washington, D.C. The corporate giants pushed back hard, calling in favors and leaning on politicians to protect their interests. As expected, they launched a lobbying blitz aimed at discrediting the lawsuits, seeking to change public opinion and sway legislators to water down any future regulations. Their goal was clear: stall the trial long enough until public attention waned. Musk wasn't the type to back down from powerful adversaries. In fact, the more they resisted, the more determined he became. As the case gained national attention, Elon made it clear that he wasn't in this for the short term. His message was unequivocal: the fight for children's safety would not be silenced. But as the legal battle dragged on, the toll it was taking on Elon's personal life became clear. His usual confidence was starting to fray. The endless court dates, depositions, and media pressure were beginning to wear him down. The stress was affecting his relationships with his children and his close friends. He spent more nights working at his desk than he did at home. His family noticed the change, and the burden weighed heavily on his shoulders. One evening, just as Elon was preparing for another day in court, he received a call from Elon Musk, his brother, who had always been his rock during turbulent times. "Elon," Kimball's voice came through the phone, filled with concern. "You're doing something incredible, but I can see you're burning out. You've got to take care of yourself. You've been at this non-stop, and it's starting to take a toll. The kids miss you. We miss you." Elon leaned back in his chair, his hand rubbing his forehead. "I know, Kimball. I know. It's just, I feel like if I step back now, everything we've worked for will crumble. These companies are powerful, and if we don't keep pushing, they'll bury the truth." "I get it," Kimball said softly, "but you've got to remember why you started this in the first place. It's not just about winning a lawsuit. It's about changing the system. And to do that, you need to be at your best." Elon sighed. He knew his brother was right, but he also knew that this fight was far from over. He wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. Elon Musk was no stranger to the pressures of high-stakes endeavors. From the early days of PayPal to the audacious risks of Tesla and SpaceX, he had faced countless obstacles, but none felt quite as overwhelming as the legal war with global tech. The pressure was relentless. Court hearings, depositions, media scrutiny. It felt like an endless loop that never gave him a moment of respite. And yet, even as the weight of the battle wore him down, he couldn't stop. This wasn't just about him. It wasn't even just about his companies. It was about something far bigger: the future of children's health, the legacy of a generation. He had to win. For them. But in the quiet moments between trials and interviews, when he was alone with his thoughts, the toll was becoming undeniable. One night, after an exhausting week of back-to-back hearings, Elon sat in his office at the Tesla factory, staring at the monitors in front of him. His hands were tense, his mind racing. The papers, stacked high with legal documents, felt heavier than ever before. His thoughts wandered to his children. How often had he promised to be there for them, to be present in their lives? But lately, it seemed like the only place he was really present was in the courtrooms and boardrooms. A knock at the door snapped him out of his thoughts. "Elon." Kimball's voice came from the other side. "Can we talk?" Elon didn't need to say anything. He stood and opened the door, and his brother stepped in. The weight of the world seemed to follow Kimball, but it wasn't anger or frustration. It was concern. "I'm here, bro," Kimball said, closing the door behind him. "How are you holding up?" Elon let out a long sigh, sinking into the chair behind his desk. "I don't know, Kimball. I'm doing everything I can. but it feels like we're just stuck. The legal battles are endless, and we're up against a company that has no interest in changing. And all of this fight, it's taking everything out of me. Kimball sat down across from him. I can see it, Elon. I can see it in your eyes. You're burning out, and I don't want you to lose yourself in this fight. There's something bigger here. But you're more than this lawsuit. You're more than global tech. You can't let this break you. Elon was quiet for a moment. I don't know how to stop Kimball. This fight, it's everything. I know that the system is broken, and the only way to fix it is to take it down from the inside. I don't know how else to do it. If I stop now, the corporations will win. They'll keep poisoning kids, and the whole world will turn a blind eye. Kimball leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. You've already done so much. The truth is out there now. It's been heard. This fight, it's bigger than you. You don't have to carry all of it by yourself. Look around. You've got allies, you've got a movement, and you've got us. Don't do this alone. Elon looked at his brother, his eyes weary but filled with determination. I don't know if I can stop now. Not when we're so close. Kimball placed a hand on his shoulder. Then don't stop, but let others help. Let the fight spread beyond just you. Let the world take it from here. This can't be your burden alone. Elon's eyes flickered with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. He knew Kimball was right. He couldn't carry the entire weight of the world on his shoulders, even if the world needed him to. Just as he was about to say something in response, his phone buzzed on the desk. It was an email from his legal team. Elon picked it up and read the subject line, Urgent, a new breakthrough. His heart skipped a beat. He opened the message. Subject, Urgent, a new breakthrough. Dear Elon, we've made a significant breakthrough. A whistleblower from within Global Tech has come forward with inside information about the company's deceptive practices and its efforts to suppress scientific studies on the dangers of BPA and other toxic chemicals in children's products. This is the moment we've been waiting for. The whistleblower has provided us with crucial internal documents that confirm that Global Tech has knowingly manipulated regulatory processes and silenced scientists who raised concerns about their product's safety. The documents also show that key executives were directly involved in decisions to keep harmful chemicals in children's products, even after knowing about their risks. This evidence could be the turning point in the lawsuit. We'll need to move quickly, but this could change everything. Sincerely, Rebecca Goldstein and the legal team. Elon stared at the screen in disbelief. The breakthrough he had been waiting for had finally arrived. An inside source from within Global Tech had exposed the corporation's dark secrets. The evidence was undeniable. Global Tech had knowingly pushed forward with dangerous products and worked to suppress scientific findings that could have changed everything. Are you okay? Kimball asked, noticing the change in his brother's expression. Elon looked up, his mind still racing. This could be it, Kimball. This is the break we needed. The whistleblower's testimony would be a game-changer. The legal team immediately filed a motion to introduce the new evidence into court, requesting an expedited hearing. The media caught wind of the story almost instantly. Within hours, the news was everywhere. Global Tech whistleblower exposes internal cover-up of dangerous chemicals in children's products. The floodgates had opened. The public outrage grew even louder. Social media exploded, with parents and activists demanding justice. Major news outlets began running investigative reports on Global Tech's history of questionable practices, while scientists and child health experts lined up to corroborate the whistleblower's claims. But the backlash wasn't just coming from the public. Global Tech itself went into full panic mode, attempting to discredit the whistleblower's testimony, casting doubt on the authenticity of the documents, and even going so far as to threaten legal action against the individual involved. Their PR teams worked overtime to try to contain the damage, but it was already too late. The tide had turned. Elon knew that the real fight had just begun. The corporations would fight tooth and nail to keep their secrets hidden, and Global Tech's army of lawyers and lobbyists would stop at nothing to undermine the whistleblower's testimony. But this time, Elon wasn't alone. The truth was on his side, and it had the power to bring down the entire system. As the legal battle escalated, Elon's resolve hardened. The exhaustion he had felt earlier began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. His team rallied around him, buoyed by the breakthrough. The weight he had been carrying for months felt lighter. He knew that the momentum had shifted, and he wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The world was watching, and the world was on his side. The next stage of the battle was about to unfold, but one thing was clear. The turning point had come, and no amount of money, power, or corporate influence could stop the tide of change. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? With the whistleblower's testimony in hand, Elon Musk and his legal team were poised for a showdown unlike any other. Global tech, the corporate titan, was finally facing real consequences for its decades-long deceit. For the first time in the history of corporate America, a giant was about to be brought to its knees, and Elon would be the one leading the charge. The air was thick with anticipation. Rebecca Goldstein, the lead environmental attorney, was poring over the last-minute details of the case. The documents from the whistleblower were irrefutable. Internal memos, emails between top executives, and reports showing that Global Tech had actively lobbied to block stricter chemical regulations, all while continuing to use toxic materials in children's products. There was no getting around it now. The truth had been exposed, and the court of public opinion was already in motion. "This is it," Rebecca said as she looked up from her stack of papers. "This is the moment we've been fighting for. If we land this, it's over for them." Elon was pacing in the corner of the room, his thoughts racing. His usual calm demeanor had returned, but it was clear that the stakes were now higher than ever. Global Tech would stop at nothing to protect its empire, but for the first time, the truth was louder than any amount of money or influence. The documents were out there. The press was watching. The people were ready for justice. "Elon, we need to be prepared for their next move," Rebecca added, noting the intensity in Elon's eyes. "They won't just sit back and take this. They'll fight us harder now, and they'll have a few tricks up their sleeves. We need to stay ahead of them." Elon stopped pacing and turned to face her. "I know, but we're ready. This is about more than just a lawsuit now. It's about sending a message. If we win this, we change the whole system." The courtroom was packed. The tension in the air was palpable, as media outlets from all over the world filled the benches and stood along the sidelines, cameras flashing as the case progressed. Elon had never been one to shy away from public scrutiny, but today felt different. Today, it was more than just a court case. It was the battle for the future of children's health, and every word, every action would be scrutinized by millions. The prosecution team, led by Rebecca and supported by some of the best legal minds in the country, presented the whistleblower's evidence methodically, one document at a time. The defense team, Global Tech's best and most expensive lawyers, fought back just as hard, dismissing the testimony as irrelevant and claiming that the company was acting within the bounds of the law. But it was clear. The walls were closing in on them. Elon sat at the table, flanked by his legal team, watching intently. As the defense attempted to undermine the credibility of the whistleblower, Elon couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. They were using their typical playbook: distract, discredit, and delay. But this time, there was no escape. The facts were too powerful. The stakes were too high. A few hours into the trial, Global Tech's CEO, Jonathan Price, took the stand. A well-groomed man in his late 50s, Price exuded confidence, too much confidence, some would say. His calm demeanor, however, could not hide the nervous twitch in his fingers as he adjusted his glasses repeatedly. "We acted in good faith," Price began, speaking in his signature smooth, authoritative tone. "Global Tech has always adhered to the regulatory standards set by the federal government. Our products are rigorously tested, and we take the safety of our customers, especially children, very seriously." Rebecca didn't waste time. "Mr. Price, are you aware that internal documents from Global Tech show that your company manipulated testing procedures and ignored safety reports that indicated the dangers of chemicals like BPA in children's products?" Price froze. The color drained from his face. He cleared his throat before responding, but his voice wavered. "That is completely unfounded. Global Tech follows all applicable regulations and prioritizes safety above all else." Rebecca calmly placed the documents on the table for the jury to see. "These emails, Mr. Price, show that your company actively lobbied to keep toxic chemicals in your products, even when scientists and researchers were raising alarms. How do you explain that? The courtroom was silent. For a moment, all eyes were on Price, who was visibly sweating now, trying to collect himself. He glanced at his lawyers, seeking reassurance, but they too seemed rattled. Elon watched the entire exchange, knowing that the case was shifting with each passing second. This wasn't just about the court proceedings. This was about exposing the truth to the world. The cracks were showing in global tech's empire, and the pressure was mounting. Back in the war room, Elon's legal team was working at a feverish pace. Rebecca was on the phone with the media, coordinating the next wave of coverage. Elon Musk was meeting with activists and parents groups who had rallied behind the movement from the start, ensuring that their voices continued to be heard. The world was watching, and the support was overwhelming. As the trial continued, more and more evidence emerged to support the whistleblower's claims. Global Tech's defense began to crumble. Their expert witnesses struggled to maintain credibility as their testimonies were systematically debunked. Meanwhile, the documents presented by the prosecution painted a damning picture of a company that had put profits over people's lives. Then came the moment that would forever change the course of the trial and the future of corporate America. In a dramatic turn, Michael Harrison, a former scientist who had worked for Global Tech in the early 2000s, took the stand. Harrison had been the one to discover the link between BPA and developmental problems in children's health, only to be silenced and pushed out of the company when he raised concerns. He had kept copies of his original research and communications, and he was now ready to testify. His words sent shockwaves through the courtroom. I was told by senior executives to keep quiet about the risks associated with our products. I was told that our testing procedures were not in line with the company's business interests. Harrison's voice shook with emotion. I wasn't the only one. We were all afraid. Afraid that if we spoke out, we'd lose our jobs, our careers, everything. The room was still, the gravity of his testimony settling over everyone. For the first time, it was clear that Global Tech had not only been negligent, they had actively hidden the truth. As the days passed, the pressure on Global Tech intensified. Share prices began to drop, and board members began distancing themselves from the CEO. The company's PR campaign, once powerful enough to manipulate the media and public opinion, was losing its influence. The tide had turned. On the final day of the trial, Elon knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. The jury deliberated for several hours, and then the verdict came: guilty. Global Tech was found liable for knowingly selling harmful products, engaging in corporate malfeasance, and suppressing scientific evidence. The court ordered the company to pay billions in damages, but more importantly, it mandated strict reforms in how products would be regulated and tested going forward. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Parents, activists, and supporters of the movement cheered as Elon emerged, surrounded by his legal team. The atmosphere was electric. News anchors were interviewing people from all over the world, and the hashtags #ToxicToys and #SafeKidsNow were trending. Elon stood at the steps, looking out at the crowd. For a brief moment, it felt like the world had shifted. This was the victory not just of a company, but of an entire movement, a movement to protect children, to safeguard their futures, and to hold corporations accountable. Elon, you did it, Rebecca said, coming up beside him. We did it. Elon gave her a tired but satisfied smile. No, we did it. All of us. The courtroom had delivered its verdict, but the real work was just beginning. Elon Musk stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by flashing cameras and cheers from the crowd. Global Tech had been brought to its knees, but it wasn't just a corporate giant that had fallen. The entire system of unchecked corporate power had been shaken to its core. The truth had prevailed, but the consequences of that truth would reverberate far beyond this case. Elon knew that the battle for a healthier, safer future for children was not over. It had only just begun. As he walked to his car, the weight of the victory was starting to settle in, but so was a creeping sense of responsibility. Global Tech's fall was only one part of the fight. The real work was in making sure this victory would have lasting consequences, not just for the company, but for the entire industry and for future generations. Corporate accountability wasn't a one-time thing. It had to become the new standard. At Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, Elon was already at work. His team was busy making preparations for an announcement that would lay out his vision for the future. A future where companies couldn't just put profits above people without facing real consequences. He just finished a meeting with Tesla's board of directors, outlining how they would align their business practices with higher ethical standards. "We've been given a rare opportunity," Elon said, standing in front of the boardroom table. "This victory isn't just about one lawsuit. It's about a broader shift in how we do business. We need to be part of the solution. Our mission has always been about more than just building electric cars. It's about creating a sustainable future. And now, it's time to apply that same approach to every part of our business." Kimball Musk, his brother and one of Tesla's board members, nodded. "It's true, Elon. But we need to be careful. Corporate reform on this scale is huge. We've seen how resistant companies can be to change, even when the evidence is clear. We're going to need more than just a statement. We need action." Elon looked out the window, his mind racing. "I've seen how powerful the system can be, how corporations can dominate, manipulate, and control narratives. We're in a unique position to make real change. We've got the public's trust now. We have to hold on to it and turn that trust into action." The announcement Elon had planned was a global one. He had decided to use his platforms, Tesla, SpaceX, and Twitter, now X, to announce the next steps. The aim was to establish a new business standard, one where transparency, ethics, and responsibility weren't just buzzwords but pillars of the corporate world. That afternoon, as Elon sat down at his desk, the final draft of his statement was on the screen. He was about to go public with something that could change the entire business landscape. "Today, we stand at the crossroads of a new era, one where companies can no longer prioritize profits over people. We have seen what happens when corporations act without accountability, when they sacrifice the health and safety of our children for the sake of bottom lines. It's time for that to change. At Tesla, we are not just building cars or developing energy solutions. We are building a future, one where innovation and responsibility go hand in hand. Today, we are announcing a new set of guidelines that will redefine how companies interact with their customers, their employees, and the world. We will be transparent in every part of our process, from the sourcing of materials to the safety of our products. We will make sure that the voices of the people are heard, and we will hold ourselves to the highest ethical standards. This isn't just about compliance. It's about commitment. We believe that businesses should be a force for good in the world, and we will lead the charge to make that vision a reality. This is just the beginning." Asterisk. When Elon pressed send, he felt the weight of history. The announcement would go viral in seconds. And just like that, Tesla wasn't just a car company or an energy provider. It was a beacon of corporate responsibility. He hoped other companies would follow suit, but deep down, he knew it wasn't going to be easy. The old way of doing business was too entrenched. Too many CEOs were more focused on short-term profits than on long-term sustainability. But Elon was undeterred. He was ready to lead the charge, even if it meant standing alone. The media went wild. News outlets around the world picked up on the announcement immediately. Social media exploded with reactions from every corner of the globe. For once, the story wasn't about Elon Musk's latest product or controversial tweet. It was about his vision for the future, one that prioritized people over profits and children's health over corporate greed. In the days that followed, other companies began to respond. Some with skepticism, others with cautious optimism. But there was one thing that no one could ignore. The conversation had shifted. Corporations were being forced to reckon with the public's new demands for accountability. Global Tech, the company that had caused so much harm, was now scrambling to salvage its reputation. Their attempts at damage control were too little, too late. The trust they had lost could not be restored with marketing campaigns. The company had been exposed, and no amount of polished PR would change that. Despite the backlash from the old guard, a movement was starting to form. Activists, parents, scientists, and consumers were now rallying around Elon's call for systemic change. In Washington, lawmakers began to take notice. The federal government, spurred on by public outrage, began drafting new regulations aimed at ensuring greater transparency in product safety and corporate practices. Elon's message was clear. Corporate power could no longer operate above the law. If companies wanted to do business, they had to play by the rules. And the rules had to be for the benefit of people, not just shareholders. But as the momentum grew, so did the challenges. Elon found himself at the center of more than just corporate reform. His companies, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, were all pushing boundaries in their respective industries. But with that innovation came scrutiny. Critics began to argue that he was overreaching, that his vision for the future was too ambitious, too risky. And then came the new challenges. With increased public scrutiny came increased regulation. Government agencies began stepping in to monitor everything from Tesla's environmental practices to SpaceX's safety protocols. What was once seen as innovation now had to be balanced against oversight. Kimball, ever the pragmatist, sat down with Elon one evening after a long day of meetings. "You've created a movement, Elon. No question about it. But we're going to need to be strategic. The world is watching, but it's not going to be an easy fight. You're up against some of the most powerful forces in the world, forces that don't want things to change." Elon took a deep breath. "I know, Kimball, but this isn't just about me. This is about the next generation. This is about creating a world where companies no longer think they can get away with poisoning kids for a profit. We can't let them win. Not now." Kimball nodded. "And we won't. But it's going to take everything we've got." The battle for a new business standard wasn't going to be easy, but Elon Musk, once again, had proven his willingness to fight for what he believed in. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, legal, political, and corporate. But Elon knew that with each victory, the vision for a better, safer world was moving closer to reality. The world had changed, but with change came resistance, relentless and often unexpected. Elon Musk had set the wheels in motion for corporate reform, but as his efforts to transform industry standards gained traction, the forces working against him began to regroup. From the moment the victory over global tech had been announced, Elon had known that the fallout wouldn't be simple. Corporate giants, whose grip on power had long been unchallenged, were scrambling to adjust. But their response was swift, and it was brutal. Behind closed doors, the conversation shifted from, "How do we fix this?" to, "How do we stop him?" The first sign of trouble came in the form of a confidential letter from an anonymous source. It was slipped under Elon's office door late one night after a long board meeting at Tesla. The letter, printed in stark black ink on plain white paper, read, "You have no idea what you've started. The momentum you've unleashed can't be stopped. But the people behind global tech aren't the only ones you've pissed off. There are others, bigger players. Prepare yourself. This is just the beginning." Elon read the letter twice, trying to discern its true meaning. Who were these bigger players? Was this just a warning, or was it the first shot fired in a much larger war? In the following days, the pressure escalated. Tesla's stock price, which had remained steady after the trial's verdict, began to show signs of volatility. Whispers of investor unease spread throughout the financial world. Major shareholders, previously staunch supporters of Elon's vision, were now questioning the long-term stability of his aggressive push for change. "I think we need to have a conversation, Elon," Jeffrey Lang, a Tesla board member, said, his tone more cautious than usual. He had been a strong advocate for Elon's disruptive ideas in the past, but now there was a hesitation in his voice. "About what?" Elon asked, leaning back in his chair. "About the next steps," Lang said. "The reforms you're pushing are huge. I mean massive. But what about the backlash? Some of our largest suppliers are coming under fire. There are regulatory concerns we didn't anticipate. And investors, they're nervous. They don't like uncertainty." Elon's face hardened. "The backlash is inevitable, but it's worth it. This is about setting a new standard for business. A standard that doesn't put profits ahead of people." Lang shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We agree with you, Elon. But this isn't just a moral fight anymore. It's economic. Global tech's fall didn't just expose a company's wrongdoings. It exposed the entire system. And that system is very powerful." The warning in the letter had been more prescient than Elon could have imagined. As he delved deeper into Tesla's supply chain, he found growing evidence of pressure being applied from multiple fronts. His team at Tesla was receiving anonymous emails, subtle threats about delays in the supply of crucial materials, and unmarked packages with cryptic notes. But it wasn't just the corporate world he was up against now. Regulatory bodies, some of which he had fought to improve over the years, were also taking a firmer stance. Under pressure from industry lobbyists, certain government agencies began to scrutinize Tesla's environmental claims more closely. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, which had once been a vocal supporter of Tesla's mission to reduce carbon emissions, was now questioning Tesla's production methods and demanding stricter audits of the company's battery recycling processes. Meanwhile, the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, launched an investigation into allegations of monopolistic behavior in the electric vehicle market. Elon knew this wasn't just about business. This was the establishment trying to protect itself from the threat he represented. In their eyes, he wasn't just a visionary. He was a disruptor, and disruptors weren't welcome. One afternoon, after a tense meeting with his legal team, Elon sat in his office, his thoughts swirling. Kimball Musk, always the more grounded of the brothers, walked in, his expression serious. "Elon," Kimball said quietly, sitting across from him, "I've been hearing some things from people in Washington. The pressure on you is building. They want you to back down. They want us to stop pushing for these reforms." Elon's gaze turned to the window. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, the sound a sharp contrast to the tension in the room. "What do you think I should do?" "I think," Kimball said, his voice measured, "you need to think about the bigger picture. We've won battles, but this war is going to be different. There's more at stake now, beyond just Tesla, beyond just our companies. This is about changing an entire system. The pressure is going to keep coming. You can't fight it all at once." Elon remained silent for a moment, contemplating his brother's words. The fight had always been about more than just technology or business. It had been about challenging the status quo, about forging a path to a future that wasn't just profitable, but sustainable. "I can't stop now, Kimball. Not after everything that's happened. Not when we're so close to breaking through." Elon's voice was firm, though there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "But I'm not stupid. I know this is bigger than us. We need to be ready." The next few weeks were a blur. Tesla faced increased scrutiny from regulators and industry watchdogs, while behind the scenes, Elon's team worked tirelessly to fend off hostile takeovers, corporate sabotage, and a growing public relations war being waged against Tesla's environmental claims. Then came the most unexpected twist yet. The White House invited Elon Musk for a private meeting. It was rare for such a high-profile business leader to be called directly to the Oval Office, and the implications of the invitation were immediately apparent. Elon was no stranger to politics. He had used his influence to shape energy policies, but he was never one to play by conventional rules. What was this really about? When he walked into the Oval Office, the president, David McAllister, was already seated behind his desk. A seasoned politician in his mid-60s, McAllister had been in office for less than 2 years, but had already proven to be a master at navigating the complex world of corporate influence. His eyes narrowed as he observed Elon take a seat. "Mr. Musk," the president began, his tone clipped, "I want to make one thing clear. You've accomplished a lot. You've built an empire, you've disrupted industries, and you've become a force to be reckoned with. But what you're doing now, pushing these reforms, disrupting the corporate world, you're upsetting a lot of powerful people. People who help fund campaigns. People who have a lot of say in how things are run in this country." Elon leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not here to make friends, Mr. President. I'm here to make a difference. The system is broken. It's not just corporate giants that need to be reined in. It's the entire system that allows them to exist without consequence." McAllister's expression softened, but his voice remained stern. "You're a smart man, Elon. But even you can't fight the system on your own. The corporations, the lobbyists, they've been in charge for decades. They have the power to shut you down. And the truth is, if you keep pushing, you might just get your wish. But not in the way you think." Elon's pulse quickened. He knew what this was. This wasn't just a warning. It was a threat wrapped in diplomacy. The president was telling him, in no uncertain terms, that his ambition could lead to his downfall. But Elon wasn't backing down. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his chest. "I'm not in this for myself, Mr. President. I'm in this for the future. And if that means taking on the entire system, then so be it." As he left the White House, the weight of the meeting pressed down on him. The forces he was up against were far more powerful than he had imagined. The system had fought back before, but this time, the stakes were higher. This wasn't just a corporate battle. It was a fight for the very soul of the future. Elon Musk's world was unrecognizable. Just months ago, he had stood on the cusp of a revolution, convinced that his crusade for corporate reform could reshape the future. Now, with every step forward, he found himself pushed deeper into the storm. Forces beyond his control were closing in on him. The world he had once believed was waiting for change had turned hostile. The system, stronger and more deeply entrenched than he had ever anticipated, was fighting back. The days after his meeting with President McAllister had been marked by a growing sense of isolation. The weight of the president's words had settled heavily on his shoulders. You might just get your wish, but not in the way you think. Elon's phone rang constantly, with board members, investors, and government officials calling to express concern. Tesla's stock had taken a hit. The media, which had once celebrated him as a hero of innovation, was now questioning his judgment. Some analysts argued that his aggressive reform agenda was endangering Tesla's future. The public's initial excitement over his pledge for corporate accountability had quickly turned into skepticism. There were whispers that Tesla might be overextending itself, pushing beyond its core mission of electric vehicles and energy to take on a fight it couldn't win. The pressure was suffocating, but Elon couldn't back down. He knew the stakes. The fight for transparency and accountability wasn't just about making money. It was about making sure the world didn't spiral into a future where profit was placed above people's well-being. He was all too aware of the forces stacked against him. What had started as a battle to hold one company accountable was now a war against the entire system. One evening, as he sat alone in his office at Tesla's headquarters, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Kimball," Elon said, without looking up, "come in." His brother stepped into the room, his face etched with concern. "Elon," Kimball began, his tone careful, "we need to talk about what's going on. The pressure is getting to everyone. You've already made an enemy of global tech, but now it's bigger. The whole corporate world is mobilizing against us, and the government's starting to side with them." Elon didn't respond immediately. He had known this was coming. He had always known that a fight against the system would attract the full force of that system. But the weight of Kimball's words hit him harder than he expected. "I can feel it too," Elon said, finally looking up at his brother. "They're pushing back harder than I ever imagined. This is more than just about Tesla now. This is about showing that the future doesn't belong to corporations anymore. It belongs to the people." Kimball nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "I know, but at what cost? We're bleeding resources, we're losing trust from investors, and now the government is starting to move against us. You can't keep going at this pace without consequences." Elon's gaze hardened, his jaw clenched. "I've come too far to turn back now. We've made history already, Kimball. The public's behind us. The truth is on our side." "But the world isn't as simple as that anymore," Kimball replied, his voice strained. "You've been fighting this war as if it's still about innovation, but it's not. It's about survival. If we don't figure out a way to weather this storm, we'll lose everything." The next day, Elon received another blow. Tesla's solar division was under investigation by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, for alleged violations of new regulations meant to curb energy monopolies. This was not just a regulatory hiccup, it was a full-scale attack. The timing was no coincidence. The investigation came in the wake of the heightened political tensions following the global tech trial. To make matters worse, SpaceX was facing its own set of challenges. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, had suspended several of its permits for launches due to concerns about safety violations in recent missions. It wasn't a major setback, but it was another sign that the government was tightening its grip on Musk's companies. All of this weighed on him, but what hurt the most was the growing disconnect between him and his closest allies. Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, was one of the few people Elon still trusted completely. But even she was starting to show signs of exhaustion. One afternoon, after an intense strategy session, she pulled him aside. "Elon," Gwynne said quietly, "I've been with you through all of this, through every launch, every risk, every fight. But you need to think carefully about where this is going. These regulatory bodies are not just pushing back, they're closing in. And the government? They're playing a long game. Elon sighed, rubbing his temples. I know, but I can't stop now. People are watching. If I back down now, it's over. We'll never have the chance to make the changes we need. You know what's at stake? I know, Gwen said, her voice tinged with worry. But you need to think about the long term, not just the mission. If we lose everything now, there won't be a future to fight for. It wasn't just the pressure from regulators and politicians. Elon was also feeling the sting of betrayal. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, his old friends and co-founders of Google, had remained silent since the global tech verdict. In the past, their support had been unwavering, but now they were nowhere to be found. In fact, it seemed as though they had quietly distanced themselves from his mission. One evening, after receiving yet another text from Larry, Elon made the decision to call him. The conversation was terse, even uncomfortable. Larry's words were polite, but the distance was clear. Elon, Larry said, we've been following what's going on. And while we respect your commitment, we think it's getting too risky. We've made some investments elsewhere, and they don't align with what you're doing. Maybe it's time to think about the bigger picture. If you push this too far, you'll lose everything, including your friends. Elon's heart sank. He had always prided himself on his ability to forge relationships, but now it seemed like even the strongest bonds were beginning to fray. The people he thought would stand with him were stepping back, unsure of what he was becoming. It was a painful realization. His vision was too disruptive for even his closest allies to comprehend. As the weeks passed, the strain began to take its toll on Elon's health. The sleepless nights, the constant meetings, the never-ending barrage of bad news. He could feel it all weighing on him. His mind was on overdrive, but his body was starting to betray him. Migraines, exhaustion, and a deep, gnawing sense of loneliness were beginning to take root. Even Kimball, always his rock, seemed increasingly distant. One night, while working late into the early hours, Elon found himself staring at the ceiling in his office. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound in the room. He closed his eyes and thought about everything he had sacrificed. The relationships, the reputation, the peace of mind. Was it all worth it? Then, the answer came to him, clear and undeniable. Yes, because this wasn't just about him. It wasn't about his companies or his legacy. It was about changing the system, about creating a future where innovation wasn't controlled by corporate greed, where the well-being of the planet came before profits. And no matter how difficult the road ahead, he couldn't stop now. But as Elon refocused on his mission, he realized one painful truth. The system wasn't going to let him win. Not easily. And the next battle was going to be the hardest one yet. Elon Musk was at a crossroads. His dream of reshaping the corporate world, of forcing an entire system to adopt a new ethical framework, was slipping from his grasp. The fight had already cost him more than he'd expected. Investors, allies, and even his own peace of mind. Yet, in the midst of the storm, he couldn't help but wonder if he had already crossed a line from which there was no return. The calls and meetings kept coming, relentless and demanding. The media coverage had turned hostile. Once a symbol of innovation, Elon was now painted as a reckless disruptor, someone who had lost sight of the bigger picture. The headlines were full of doubts, questioning Tesla's viability, speculating on the future of SpaceX, and attacking his personal motivations. But Elon knew better than to get bogged down by the noise. The system he was fighting against had always worked by creating distractions, by bending the truth to its will. They used fear, confusion, and lies as weapons. And right now, those weapons were being turned against him. His head buzzed with the constant barrage of criticism, but there was still a flicker of hope, a small spark that refused to go out. If he was going to turn this around, he needed to find a way to cut through the noise. He needed help. And then, the unexpected happened. It came in the form of an invitation. One rainy afternoon, Elon received a cryptic email from an unknown source. The message was short and to the point. Meet me at 7 p.m. tonight, at the Old Horizon Technologies building on the outskirts of town. We can't talk over email. Trust me, this is bigger than anything you've faced so far. Elon sat back, studying the message. The address given was familiar. It was the former headquarters of Horizon Technologies, a company that had once been a major player in the tech world before it had mysteriously collapsed several years ago. Its downfall had been tied to allegations of corporate espionage, and the company had vanished from the public eye almost overnight. Elon had no idea who this unknown source could be, but the sense of urgency and the stakes were too high to ignore. At 6:45 p.m., Elon left his office, his mind racing. Kimball had tried to warn him, urging him to take a step back, but Elon couldn't. The world was watching. The momentum was shifting against him, and if he didn't act soon, it would be too late. By 7 p.m., Elon stood outside the old Horizon building, its once grand exterior now weathered and covered in graffiti. The building was a shell of its former self, dark windows, broken lights, and an unsettling silence in the air. Elon hesitated for a moment, but then walked toward the entrance. The door was slightly ajar, as if waiting for him. Inside, the building was even darker. The faint hum of a generator in the background was the only sound. Elon's eyes adjusted to the dim light as he made his way through the corridor. The walls were lined with old, abandoned offices, their windows cracked and their desks littered with dust and debris. It felt like a place frozen in time, a relic of an era long gone. Elon Musk, a voice suddenly called out from the shadows. Elon froze, his heart quickening. The voice was unfamiliar, yet there was something about it that seemed oddly reassuring. A figure stepped forward, tall and thin, wearing a nondescript black jacket and glasses. The face was partially obscured by a hood, but there was an unmistakable sharpness in the features. "I'm glad you came," the figure said, stepping into the light. "You're running out of time, Elon. They've got you cornered. And the only way you're going to win this fight is if you understand what you're really up against." Elon squinted. "Who are you?" The figure smiled, though the expression didn't quite reach their eyes. "That's not important right now. What matters is that you're about to make a decision. You're playing a game that most people in your position wouldn't dare to play. The system, as you know it, is stacked against you. But there's another way." Elon stepped forward cautiously. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the real power behind the corporations, behind the government, behind everything you're trying to change," the figure said. "You're fighting the wrong battle. The people you think are your enemies? They're only puppets. The real strings are being pulled by a network you haven't even begun to uncover." The words hit Elon hard. He had always known there were powerful forces behind the curtain, but hearing them spoken out loud made them seem much more tangible, much more dangerous. "Who's pulling the strings?" Elon demanded. "Who's behind this?" The figure paused, then leaned closer. "You've already met them. The people in charge of the biggest tech companies. The government officials you've been clashing with. They're just the face of a much larger, more insidious network. A group of shadow elites, people who control the flow of capital, the future of technology, and even your own fate." Elon's mind raced. He thought about the government investigations, the media attacks, the corporate sabotage. It all started to make sense. This wasn't just a battle for market share. This was a war for the very soul of the future. "I need proof," Elon said, his voice tight with urgency. "I need something concrete." The figure smiled faintly. "You already have it. All those stories about corporate espionage, about environmental sabotage, those weren't just isolated incidents. They're coordinated attacks. But they've been careful, very careful, to keep their tracks covered. They've made sure you'll never find the truth." Elon's mind was spinning. "Why tell me all this? What do you want?" The figure took a deep breath, their gaze unwavering. "What I want is simple. I want to help you expose them. But you'll have to trust me. And you'll have to take risks that you've never taken before. Are you willing to do that?" Elon hesitated. He didn't trust anyone easily, especially not someone who seemed to be operating in the shadows. But this felt different. The figure seemed to know too much, had too much insight into the workings of the system Elon was trying to bring down. Finally, he spoke. "I'm listening." Over the next few days, Elon met with the mysterious figure in secret, learning more about the hidden network that was influencing the corporate world and government. It was everything he had suspected, but hearing it from someone with first-hand knowledge was a game changer. The puppet masters behind the scenes had been using their wealth and power to manipulate public policy, control media narratives, and maintain an iron grip on the future of technology and industry. Elon knew that this was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. If he was going to take them down, he needed a new strategy, one that didn't just fight the visible enemies, but dismantled the very system that allowed them to thrive. But even as Elon began to formulate his next move, the pressure continued to build. Tesla's stock was in freefall. The government investigations were intensifying, and his own allies were beginning to fracture, unsure of whether the fight was worth it. It was clear now that Elon was at the edge. His crusade for a better future was crumbling under the weight of the system's might. The question was no longer if he would survive this battle, but how. Elon Musk had never felt so cornered. Every move he made seemed to be met with resistance, every step forward an invitation for the system to strike back. But amidst the mounting pressure, one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. If he was going to fight for the future he believed in, it had to be now, or it would be too late. Tesla's stock had reached its lowest point in months, dipping under $100 per share for the first time in years. The once thriving company, seen as the beacon of clean energy and innovation, was now the target of aggressive short selling and legal challenges. Analysts were openly questioning whether Tesla could survive the next quarter. SpaceX wasn't faring much better. The FAA investigation had cast a shadow over their upcoming Mars mission, and several key government contracts had been delayed indefinitely. The media had latched onto every setback, each failure amplified as evidence that Elon's ambitions were ungrounded. The story of a genius visionary had become the tale of a reckless idealist about to lose everything. His allies were beginning to distance themselves. Kimball had been increasingly vocal about Elon's need to reassess his strategy, while Gwynne Shotwell, always the pragmatist, had expressed her growing concerns about SpaceX's future. Investors, once eager to back his every venture, were now demanding more cautious leadership, and the government was not only keeping its distance but actively hindering his progress. Despite it all, Elon knew what had to be done. Late one night, in the dimly lit conference room at Tesla's headquarters, Elon sat alone, staring at a digital map of the world. His fingers hovered over the screen, but he wasn't looking at the locations. It was the connections between them that had his attention. He had started to see something in his mind's eye, a pattern in the chaos. The invisible web that had ensnared not only his companies, but the future of technology and society as a whole. He had found his target, the system. It was bigger than just a few powerful CEOs or government officials. It was a network of people with the power to shape the future. People who had quietly manipulated the flow of capital, controlled global media narratives, and ensured that the public never saw the truth. These were the puppet masters behind the curtain. They were the reason the system remained so entrenched and why any attempt at disruption, no matter how noble, was doomed to fail. Elon had uncovered just enough of their operations to understand how they worked. He had access to insider information from his mysterious informant, details about their illegal financial schemes, their covert lobbying efforts, and their corrupt influence on public policy. This was the ammunition he needed to go public, to take the fight straight to the heart of the system. But in order to expose them, he would have to risk everything. The stakes had never been higher. He called Kimball into his office the next morning. Kimball's face was drawn with exhaustion. The weight of their family's business decisions had always been a heavy burden, but it was especially so now. "Elon, you can't keep going like this," Kimball said, his voice low. "You're pushing yourself, and all of us, too hard. You're right that the system's broken, but the price you're paying might be too much. Are you prepared to lose everything for this?" Elon didn't hesitate. "I'm already losing everything, Kimball. Tesla, SpaceX, my relationships, my health, my peace of mind. But it's not about me anymore. It's about the future. I can't go back. I won't." Kimball stood silent for a moment, his hand rubbing his temple as if trying to find the right words. Finally, he spoke. "I get it. I really do. But the way you're doing this, you're burning bridges with people who could help us. You're alienating the ones who believed in your vision from the start. We need allies, Elon, not enemies." Elon leaned forward, his eyes intense. "The allies I need aren't the ones who are too scared to fight. The ones who stand with me now are the ones who truly believe in what I'm doing. The rest? They're just a distraction." Kimball sighed. "You're playing a dangerous game. But if you're going to do this, you'll need more than just the truth. You'll need support. You'll need proof. And you'll need to be prepared for the fallout." "I know," Elon said, his voice steady. "And that's why I'm going to make sure that the world knows what they've been hiding." Over the following weeks, Elon worked tirelessly, assembling everything he had learned about the secretive network controlling the world's corporations. He had a trove of information: financial records, private communications, insider accounts, and even evidence of illegal lobbying practices. But he knew that simply releasing this information wouldn't be enough. It had to be more than just a leak. It had to be a message that would force the system to respond. His plan was risky, and he couldn't execute it alone. Despite his best efforts to push everyone away, he now realized that he needed his closest allies more than ever. Gwynne Shotwell, who had always been his most pragmatic sounding board, was brought in to help strategize. Kimball was still uncertain, but he supported his brother, albeit reluctantly. Together, they would take the most dangerous gamble of their lives. The day Elon decided to go public with the information, he stood at the helm of Tesla's headquarters, looking out over the sprawling campus. It had been his dream to build a company that would change the world, and now, it seemed, it might all come crashing down. But even as he stood on the precipice, he didn't feel fear. Instead, he felt a deep, almost quiet resolve. The world would know what they had been hiding. The system, the one that had been designed to keep people like him and others in line, would be exposed for what it truly was: a network of corruption, greed, and control. But exposing it would not be without consequences. The fallout would be seismic. There would be no going back. At precisely noon, Elon Musk took to the stage at the Tesla annual shareholder meeting, a live-streamed event that was broadcast to millions. As he walked up to the podium, the room fell silent. The faces of Tesla's board members were a mixture of skepticism and concern. He could see the unease in their eyes, their fear that he was about to do something reckless. But Elon had made his decision, and he wasn't about to back down. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but resolute, "I stand before you today not just as the CEO of Tesla, but as someone who believes in the power of truth. Over the past few months, I've uncovered a network of corruption that has been controlling the fate of not just Tesla, but all of us. It is a system that has been manipulating public policy, controlling the flow of information, and hoarding power in the hands of a few individuals. These are the people who have tried to silence me. But today, I'm exposing the truth." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Behind the scenes, the same elites who control our largest corporations are working in concert to maintain their power. They've rigged the system in their favor, and I've gathered the proof to show it. What I'm about to release will shake the foundations of everything we've ever known about corporate governance, about the environment, and about the future of technology. This is the beginning of a new chapter, one in which the truth can no longer be hidden." The data was released: financial documents, email chains, and whistleblower testimonies, all laid bare for the world to see. As soon as the information hit the internet, the reaction was immediate and explosive. The media erupted in frenzy, the public was stunned, and government agencies scrambled to respond. The names of the corporate elites, the lobbyists, the government officials, they were all there, exposed for their roles in maintaining a corrupt system. The scale of the operation was breathtaking, and the proof was irrefutable. But with this move, Elon had opened a Pandora's box. As the dust began to settle, it became clear: the system was not going to go down without a fight. The backlash was swift and brutal. Government agencies, corporate lawyers, and political opponents went on the offensive, launching legal challenges, calling for investigations into Elon's actions, and working to discredit the information he had revealed. The fight was no longer just about exposing the truth. It was now a battle for survival. The storm had broken. The chaos that Elon Musk had unleashed with his bold move was now beyond his control. His name had become a battle cry, a symbol of defiance, but also a target for the most powerful institutions in the world. What had begun as a carefully orchestrated exposure of the corrupt forces pulling the strings behind global corporations had quickly turned into a full-scale war. And Elon Musk was right in the heart of it. The first blow came within hours of the release. A joint task force of government regulators and corporate lawyers filed a class action lawsuit against Tesla, SpaceX, and several of Elon's other ventures, accusing him of defamation, data breaches, and misrepresentation. The lawsuit claimed that by exposing private corporate communications and classified financial documents, Elon had broken the law, and worse, had endangered national security by exposing sensitive defense contracts related to SpaceX's work with the U.S. military. Elon knew this was only the beginning. The powers he had antagonized were far-reaching, with tentacles that extended into every corner of global governance. The world's most influential media outlets, who had once praised his ambition, now turned on him with venom. News anchors dissected his every word, analyzing his past behavior for signs of instability and questioning his motives. In an instant, the public perception of Elon had shifted. The visionary tech mogul was now a rogue billionaire, a dangerous iconoclast who had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He sat in his office, staring at the flood of messages and media reports streaming in. It was a maelstrom of legal threats, public attacks, and even personal insults. A few calls had come in from friends, including Kimball, but each conversation ended with an uncomfortable silence. No one knew what to say anymore. Elon felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His every move now carried enormous consequences, not just for him, but for everyone around him. People's jobs were on the line. Investors were scrambling to protect their interests. And as much as he wanted to push forward, there was a part of him that understood the severity of the reckoning. This was no longer just about business, it was about survival. But no matter how dire it became, Elon's resolve remained unchanged. This was what he had always warned would happen. The system was rigged, and he had exposed it. Now, the world was waking up to the truth, but the people in power weren't going to let that happen quietly. "Sir, we need to talk," Gwen Shotwell said, entering his office with her usual level-headed demeanor. She'd been his closest ally at SpaceX, and though her concern was evident, her tone was always pragmatic. Elon looked up from the screen, his face tired but determined. "What's the latest?" She took a deep breath and sat across from him. "The fallout's spreading. The lawsuit against Tesla and SpaceX is just the beginning. There's talk of freezing assets, suspending operations. Our board is getting cold feet, and investors are pulling out." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "I knew this would happen. The system doesn't let go that easily." "You were right," Gwen said, her voice softer. "But the reality is, if we don't act fast, they'll bury us. We're fighting a war on too many fronts, and right now, our enemies are working together. If we keep going this route, we might lose everything." Elon met her gaze, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Gwen had always been the voice of reason, and her warning carried a gravitas he could not ignore. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "There's only one way out," she replied. "You have to play their game. Not in the way they expect, but in a way that forces them to come to the table." Elon frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Leverage," she said. "You've exposed them, but you need to force them into a position where they have no choice but to deal. Right now, you're the one on the defensive. We need to flip the script. You need to show them that you control the future, that you're willing to sacrifice everything to ensure that their system crumbles." Elon's eyes narrowed. "You mean, I have to give them something they can't ignore? Something they'll be forced to respond to, even if it means destroying me in the process?" "Exactly," Gwen said, her tone sharp and unwavering. "We're going to have to put everything on the line. You have to demonstrate that if they want to win, they'll have to take you down completely. It's all or nothing." Elon's mind raced as he thought through the options. It was a dangerous move, but it was the only one that could give him a shot at surviving. If he was going to go down, he might as well make sure that the system went down with him. That evening, Elon gathered his closest advisors for an emergency meeting. Kimball, Gwen, and a few key members of Tesla and SpaceX's leadership team assembled in the conference room. The tension was palpable. No one knew exactly how far Elon was willing to go, but they could sense the gravity of the situation. We have one chance, Elon said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. We need to take everything we know about the system and put it on display. We're going to show the world just how deep the corruption runs, and we're going to do it in a way that forces them to negotiate. Kimball shook his head. Elon, this isn't just a negotiation anymore. They'll try to destroy you. They'll come at you with everything they've got. Elon looked at his brother, his gaze unwavering. I've been prepared for this, but I can't stop now. I can't go back to just being another cog in the machine. If I back down, then I'm just another puppet. And I'm not going to let that happen. Gwen spoke up, her voice tinged with urgency. We need to act fast. The longer we wait, the more they'll close ranks. We need to move now, before they have the chance to strike first. After a long pause, the room agreed. Elon's plan was risky, but it was the only play they had left. They were going to expose everything. Every document, every conversation, every link in the chain of corruption. They would shine a spotlight on the powerful figures who had maintained the status quo, showing the world the true nature of the system they had built. But they needed to act quickly, before the system could silence them completely. In the days that followed, Elon and his team worked around the clock, compiling the most damning evidence they could find. They created a multi-pronged attack, one that would involve releasing documents, holding press conferences, and organizing global protests. They knew the risks, but they had no choice. On the day of the release, Elon appeared once again before the cameras. This time, however, it was not just Tesla shareholders who were watching. The entire world was tuned in. His words, his actions, would be broadcast to millions. Standing at a podium, Elon looked into the camera, his voice calm but fierce. You've seen the truth. You've seen how the system works. You've seen the people who have been pulling the strings. But this is just the beginning. This is not about me, or Tesla, or SpaceX. This is about the future of humanity, the future of technology, and the future of the world we are leaving for our children. He paused, the silence in the room thick with anticipation. This fight is bigger than any corporation. It's bigger than any government. It's about whether we choose to live in a world where a few people control everything, or a world where the people have the power to shape their own destiny. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm asking you to join me in this fight. The world responded. Protests erupted in major cities. Financial markets wavered. Governments scrambled to respond. And the elites, those who had thought they could silence Elon Musk, found themselves in a precarious position. For the first time, the balance of power was shifting. The initial shockwaves from Elon Musk's bold actions reverberated around the globe. Protests sparked in cities across continents, with people rallying under a single banner. The fight for a future free from the grip of a corrupt, manipulative system. His name became synonymous with rebellion, a hero to some, a pariah to others. The world was divided, but one thing was certain. Elon had successfully ignited a revolution. In the days following the massive release of evidence, the backlash from the powerful institutions Musk had challenged was swift and brutal. Lawsuits multiplied, legal teams descended on his companies, and pressure mounted from every corner. But Elon wasn't backing down. His resolve was only hardened by the attacks. He had made a choice. Either the system would bend, or it would break. And he would be the one to make sure it broke. Elon had anticipated the pressure. He'd spent his entire career walking the tightrope between groundbreaking success and complete failure, but this was different. This wasn't just about business or technology. This was about dismantling an entrenched power structure that had held the world hostage for decades. In his private office, with only Gwynne Shotwell and Kimball by his side, Elon prepared for the next phase of his strategy. "It's working," Gwynne said, her voice calm but laced with a trace of urgency. "The protests are spreading, and we're seeing some cracks in the media's narrative. But we need to keep the momentum going. If we let up now, they'll crush us." Kimball leaned back in his chair, his face tight with concern. "Elon, what you're doing, it's dangerous. They're not going to just let this go. You've exposed the very heart of the machine, and now it's out for blood." "I know," Elon said, his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him, "but they won't stop until they think they've won. So, I need to make sure they don't just think we're fighting back. I need them to know that we've already won. We have to push them to the point of no return." The room fell silent for a moment, the gravity of Elon's words hanging in the air. What he was suggesting wasn't just a campaign. It was a full-scale, global fight for the future. And if they were going to pull it off, it would take everything they had. Elon's team went into overdrive. They coordinated with international organizations, tech activists, and whistleblower groups to keep the pressure on. Protests escalated into organized movements, with people wearing #ChangeTheSystem t-shirts and holding up signs calling for reform and transparency. They spread across continents. From the streets of Paris to New York, from London to Sao Paulo, the revolution was gaining momentum. At the same time, Tesla and SpaceX went into damage control mode. Lawyers fought back against the lawsuits, while PR teams worked around the clock to keep the media narrative from spiraling further out of control. But as much as they tried, the media couldn't ignore the storm Musk had unleashed. Even the most conservative outlets were forced to cover the protests, the revelations, and the cracks beginning to form in the power structure Elon had exposed. Then came the unexpected. A message appeared on Elon's phone one morning, marked with an anonymous label. It read, "We have the proof you need to take them down. But be warned, the system will do everything in its power to silence you before you can use it." Elon didn't hesitate. He passed the message along to Gwen, who immediately got the legal team involved. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for, something that could turn the tide in their favor. But the message was clear. There was a cost to pushing forward. Weeks passed, and the fight grew more intense. The attacks from the system's defenders grew more personal, more invasive. Elon received threats against his family, and his associates began to feel the pressure. Even Kimball was growing increasingly anxious, wondering how far Elon was willing to push before the consequences became too great. But Elon didn't waver. Every attack, every threat, only made him more determined. He knew the risks, but he also knew the stakes. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future of every person on this planet, especially the next generation. The ones who would inherit the world his generation had left behind. Then came the ultimate challenge. A high-level meeting was set up by the system, a consortium of the world's most powerful figures, the ones behind the curtain. These were the people who had been pulling the strings for decades, the ones who had hidden the truth. They called Elon directly, a rare move that indicated their desperation. It was clear they saw him as a threat, but they also recognized that the game was changing. The invitation came through his private channels. They wanted to meet in person, to negotiate. Elon knew this was the moment of truth. The system could either make concessions, start negotiating, or try to destroy him. There was no middle ground. The stakes had never been higher. Gwen Shotwell was the first to advise caution. "Elon, you don't know what they'll offer. You've exposed them, but this isn't just about winning this fight. This is about making sure they can never regain control. We need to keep the pressure on." Elon nodded, but he was already thinking beyond their conversation. "This isn't just about exposing them. I need to make sure they can't recover. If I give them any leverage, we lose. We can't just win. We have to break them." The meeting was set in a neutral location, an undisclosed, high-security building surrounded by layers of protection. As Elon stepped into the room, he was greeted by a few familiar faces, along with several new ones. They represented the core of the system, each person a key player in the global game of power and influence. At the head of the table sat a man who Elon had heard about but never met. Victor Hale, a billionaire investor whose firm controlled major financial institutions, media conglomerates, and political parties around the world. He was one of the architects of the system Elon had exposed. Hale's icy smile as Elon entered was the only greeting he offered. "Elon," he said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "I must admit, I didn't think you'd last this long. But here we are." Elon didn't flinch. "I'm here because we both know this isn't just about business anymore. This is about power. And I'm taking it back." Hale's smile faltered for a second before he regained his composure. "You think you can dismantle everything we've built? You've made a lot of noise, but you're playing a dangerous game. A game that, I assure you, will come with consequences." Elon leaned forward. "I know the cost, but you've underestimated something. People aren't afraid of you anymore. You've lost control. This system is already falling apart. Victor Hale's expression darkened. That's where you're wrong. This system doesn't fall. It evolves. And if you're not careful, you'll be left behind. The words hung heavy in the air. It was clear that Hale wasn't offering peace. He was offering a chance to join the system, to compromise and accept a seat at the table. But that wasn't Elon's way. I'm not here to negotiate, Elon said flatly. I'm here to finish what I started. If you want to take me down, do it. But make no mistake, when I win, this system is gone for good. For a moment, the room was still, everyone weighing the tension. And then Hale's tone shifted, his voice laced with a finality that echoed through the room. You have no idea what you're up against. Elon stood tall. I've spent my life preparing for this. The meeting with Victor Hale had rattled Elon more than he had let on. Hale's words, though cloaked in confidence, hinted at the depth of the forces aligned against him. The system, as Elon had come to call it, was not just a set of corrupt corporations and entrenched politicians. It was a living, breathing entity, a machine so powerful that it seemed as if it could never be dismantled. But Elon had come too far to turn back now. He understood the stakes better than anyone. If he was to succeed, he would need to make the final push, an all-out assault on the system that had kept humanity locked in a cycle of control and exploitation. In the days that followed, Elon's team accelerated their operations. The pressure on Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures only grew. Lawsuits kept piling up, and several of his top executives faced harassment from government officials and corporate rivals. Elon could feel the walls closing in. But with every attack on his companies, Elon's resolve only grew stronger. He wasn't just fighting for his businesses. He was fighting for something much bigger. It was a battle for the future of technology, freedom, and human potential. This was about the next generation, about the children who would inherit a world shaped by his actions. Gwynne Shotwell had become increasingly worried. Elon, they're going to retaliate soon. We've exposed them, but they're moving fast to take us down. We need to be ready for the counterattack. Elon nodded, but wasn't shaken. I'm ready, but we have to be smarter than them. We've built the right network, and the people are on our side. This isn't just about defeating them. It's about showing the world what they've been hiding. We need to go public with our final move. Kimball leaned forward, his face tight with concern. You mean everything, don't you? The final piece of the puzzle? Yes, Elon replied, his voice steady. I've been holding back, but now it's time. It's all or nothing. The final piece was the information Elon had been given weeks earlier. A trove of documents, financial records, and private communications. The kind of data that could expose the very core of the system. It was explosive. It tied together all the corruption, greed, and manipulation that had been hidden for decades. It was the smoking gun that could bring down the most powerful corporations and government institutions in the world. But there was a catch. The information was far-reaching, implicating everyone from high-ranking government officials to the CEOs of the biggest multinational corporations. Exposing it would likely mean the end of Elon Musk and everyone associated with him. His life would be on the line, his companies dismantled, and his reputation in ruins. Yet, despite the risks, Elon knew that this was the only way forward. The system would stop at nothing to maintain its stranglehold on the world, and the only way to break free was to expose everything. Elon gathered his inner circle once again. Gwynne, Kimball, and a select group of trusted advisors sat around the table. They had worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment, and now the time had come. This is it, Elon said, his voice low but filled with conviction. We are going to take everything we have and release it to the public. All the data, every single document, every piece of information. It's time the world saw what we're really up against. Gwynne looked concerned. Are you sure, Elon? Once we release this, there's no going back. They'll have nothing left to lose. They'll come after us with everything they've got. Elon paused, his gaze intense. I'm not worried about what they'll do. I'm worried about what will happen if we don't do this. If we don't expose them, we're letting them win. We have one shot at this. One. Kimball let out a long breath. Okay, but we need to be prepared. There are going to be repercussions. This is bigger than anything we've ever faced. Elon nodded. I know, but I've been preparing for this my whole life. It's time to finish what I started. The night before the release, Elon spent hours going through the documents once more. He was looking for any loopholes, any way the system could spin the narrative, any way he could protect himself or his family. But he knew there were no guarantees. If this worked, it would change the world. If it didn't, the consequences would be catastrophic. He sat in the quiet of his office, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. Tomorrow, the world would change. And whether it was for the better or for the worse would depend on how the world responded. It happened at exactly 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Elon Musk's team released the entire trove of documents to the public, flooding news outlets, social media platforms, and the dark web. The files were comprehensive, irrefutable, and detailed, painting a clear picture of the system's stranglehold on power. The documents exposed the hidden networks that connected governments, corporations, and financial institutions in ways the public had never imagined. They showed how the most powerful people in the world had used their influence to manipulate markets, crush dissent, and control the flow of information. They demonstrated how vast, coordinated, and insidious the web of corruption truly was. As the files went live, the impact was immediate and overwhelming. News outlets scrambled to report on the leaked documents, with some openly declaring it the most significant whistleblowing event in history. Social media exploded with hashtags like #EndTheSystem and #PowerToThePeople, as millions of people around the world began to demand accountability. But the response from the system was swift and ruthless. Victor Hale and his associates didn't waste any time. Within hours, the first wave of attacks began. Lawsuits were filed, subpoenas were issued, and top officials from the government and major corporations appeared on television, denouncing Elon Musk and his actions as criminal. They called the leak an act of terrorism, an attack on national security, and a direct threat to global stability. But it wasn't just legal pressure. The system had more tools at its disposal. The media was weaponized against him, with outlets owned by Hale's corporations spreading lies and misinformation about Elon's motivations. They called him a madman, a disruptor who was endangering the future of humanity. They labeled him a traitor to the nation, a threat to world peace. But something unexpected happened. The public didn't buy it. Instead of backing down, people rallied behind Elon. The leaks were too damning, the evidence too clear. The protests that had started months earlier now reached a fever pitch, with millions of people taking to the streets in cities across the globe. The movement was no longer just about exposing corruption. It had become a fight for freedom, for transparency, for the future of humanity itself. Governments around the world, seeing the tide of public opinion shift, began to take notice. Some tried to stifle the protest with force, but it only fueled the fire. Others, fearing the growing unrest, began to issue statements acknowledging the need for reform, even if they refused to name the people responsible for the corruption. Elon's position was precarious, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone. The people were with him. The system was now fighting for its survival, but it had underestimated one thing: the power of a united people. The protests turned into a global movement, and those who had once been content to remain behind the scenes found themselves on the defensive. Elon knew there was still a long way to go. This wasn't over. The system might be faltering, but it wasn't done yet. The next phase of the fight would require even more sacrifice. But one thing had changed irrevocably. The power was shifting. As he sat in his office, surrounded by the chaos of a world in transformation, Elon Musk understood that this was the final game. The future was in the hands of the people now, and whether he won or lost, he had ignited a revolution that could never be extinguished. The day after the release, the world woke up to a new reality. Governments, corporations, and individuals who had once been at the pinnacle of power now found themselves scrambling to maintain control. Elon Musk's daring move had sparked an irreversible wave of change. The age of the system, the shadowy network that had manipulated global affairs, was crumbling before their eyes. For Elon, the victory was bittersweet. The protests had gained unprecedented momentum, but so had the reprisals. Those who controlled the system weren't going to give up easily. They would fight to the bitter end. Elon knew the battle for the future was only just beginning. The question now was, Could the revolution succeed in tearing down a centuries-old power structure and rebuild a new world from the ashes? The next few weeks were a blur of media storms, legal battles, and political maneuvering. Lawsuits kept piling up, and the coordinated attacks on Musk's companies were relentless. Tesla's stock plummeted, SpaceX's projects were threatened by international sanctions, and Musk's personal life was under siege. But as pressure mounted from all sides, Elon stayed the course. His office, once a sanctuary for brainstorming and development, had become a war room. Gwynne Shotwell and Kimball Musk were there every day, working with teams to manage the fallout. The release had ignited chaos, but it had also awakened something greater, a global consciousness. "People are listening," Gwynne said one afternoon, sitting across from Elon at his desk, her brow furrowed. "They're not just protesting anymore, they're organizing. Local governments are starting to adopt transparency measures. Some of them are even calling for systemic reform. But the system's not going to just roll over," Elon replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were intense. "They'll fight back with everything they have. I've exposed the cancer that's eating this world. Now, we need to make sure it doesn't regrow." Kimball, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, finally spoke up. "What do we do next? We can't just keep reacting to their attacks. We need a vision, a plan. How do we take the next step?" Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind whirring with possibilities. "We need to give the world a new path. We've exposed the corruption, but now we need to offer the people a new way of doing things. The system has controlled everything: energy, information, resources. We need to create alternatives, decentralized systems that empower people, not corporations. We need to show them that there's another way." The idea that had been percolating in Elon's mind for months finally took shape. A new world order, a vision of decentralized power structures, open-source technologies, and systems built around the idea of collective empowerment rather than corporate domination. Tesla and SpaceX were already leading the charge in their respective fields: clean energy, space exploration, and technology. Now, Elon's vision was expanding to encompass something far larger: the creation of a decentralized economy. A network of interconnected, independent entities that would no longer be controlled by a handful of powerful elites. Elon's new goal was to build infrastructure that would support this world, a new foundation for the future of humanity. As Elon spoke about his vision, Gwynne and Kimball began to realize the enormity of the task ahead. It wasn't just about fixing the problems of the present. It was about fundamentally changing the structure of society itself. "We'll need to get ahead of the curve," Gwynne said. "We can't just react to their attacks. We need to create the future they fear. A new economic system, built from the ground up. That means bringing together the best minds in technology, finance, and governance." "That's right," Elon replied, a gleam of determination in his eyes. "We need to build a platform, something that integrates artificial intelligence, blockchain, renewable energy, and community-based governance into a seamless system. It'll be open source, transparent, and self-sustaining. It will empower individuals, not corporations." Kimball stood up, energized by the idea. "I've been working on some ideas for a new, decentralized financial platform that could operate alongside cryptocurrencies, something that incentivizes environmental and social responsibility." "That's it," Elon exclaimed. "We need to integrate technology with humanity's core values: compassion, sustainability, equality. We'll show the world that a system built on trust and transparency can work." Elon and his team knew they had to move quickly. They began assembling a coalition of technologists, innovators, activists, and thought leaders to develop the framework for this new world order. These were the dreamers who had always believed in the potential of technology to create a better world but had been silenced or marginalized by the old power structures. As the months passed, the momentum continued to build. Musk's companies, once under siege, began to thrive in this new environment of openness and transparency. Tesla's mission of making electric vehicles accessible to everyone and accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy began to take on new meaning in the context of the global revolution. SpaceX's vision of making humanity a multiplanetary species resonated deeply with the idea that Earth was just the beginning, that the future could be free from the constraints of the old system. And yet, as their movement grew, So did the opposition. Victor Hale and his allies hadn't taken the revelations lying down. The global elite, once unseen and unchallenged, now fought back with all their power. They poured billions into media campaigns to smear Musk's reputation, framing him as a madman who wanted to destroy the global economy. The attacks were personal and relentless. But this time, Elon wasn't fighting alone. The public, once disillusioned and disengaged, now stood behind him. Millions of people around the world were joining the cause, fighting not just for Elon, but for themselves. They were fighting for the right to choose their own destiny. And Elon had a new weapon: the people. As the revolutionary wave continued to grow, Musk made a bold decision. The world was ready for something truly transformative, and he was going to deliver it. He was no longer just a businessman or a technologist. He was now a leader of a movement. It was time to stake everything on one final act: the launch of the global decentralized network. This network would be a global, open-source platform designed to facilitate a decentralized economy. It would integrate renewable energy solutions, blockchain technology, and AI governance, all operating independently of the corporate and political systems that had once ruled the world. The launch would be the first step toward a new era, an era where power was distributed, not hoarded, where decisions were made by communities, not elites. It would be a platform for global cooperation, a chance for humanity to take control of its own destiny. But the stakes were high. Musk knew that the establishment would stop at nothing to prevent the platform from launching. If they succeeded, the revolution would lose its momentum, and the system would recover. As the day of the launch approached, Elon's nerves were on edge. There were so many unknowns. Would the platform work? Would the people embrace it? And, most pressing of all, would the forces he had exposed try to shut it down before it could gain traction? But in the final moments, as the platform went live, something incredible happened. The world watched as the global decentralized network went online. The first few hours were critical. Would the system crash, overwhelmed by demand? Or would it stand strong, as the foundation for the new world Elon had envisioned? To everyone's astonishment, it worked seamlessly. The network, built on blockchain technology, was faster, more secure, and more transparent than any centralized system. It allowed people to connect with others around the world, create businesses, and govern themselves without the need for corporations or politicians to mediate. Renewable energy solutions were integrated, and users could track their carbon footprint in real time, incentivizing sustainable practices. The revolution had taken root. The system was not defeated in a day. But the global decentralized network was proof that a new world was possible, one where power belonged to the people, not to the elites. Elon Musk had shown the world that it was possible to break free from the chains of the old system. Now, the fight for the future was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a fight for a world reborn. As the first global transactions were processed on the new network, Elon stood on the balcony of his office, looking out over a city that was beginning to change. People were free, connected, and empowered. This was only the beginning. The true battle for the future had just begun. But now, for the first time, humanity had a fighting chance. Elon Musk sat at his desk, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. The city skyline stretched before him, bathed in the orange glow of the setting sun. Below, life moved on, but the world was undeniably different now. People had woken up. The revolution had begun, and with it, an uncertain future. For years, Elon had been driven by a single, all-encompassing purpose: to push the boundaries of what was possible, to break free from the constraints of the old system. He had seen how technology could change the world, but now, as the world embraced the decentralized network that he had pioneered, he saw something else: hope. The next stage was the hardest. The global decentralized network was more than just a tool. It was a new way of life. The first few months of its existence had been chaotic, with the old powers trying to sabotage it from every angle. Governments tried to pass new regulations that would curb its influence. Corporations fought back with media campaigns and legal maneuvers. The forces that had controlled the world for centuries weren't going to disappear overnight. But they were no longer the only game in town. Around the world, the grassroots movements that had gained traction following the leak were beginning to organize more effectively. activists, technologists, entrepreneurs, and ordinary citizens, all united by a single vision of a world that was no longer controlled by the few but shared by the many. They called themselves the New Dawn, and they were working to transform the global economy from the ground up. Every day, more communities were adopting decentralized energy grids, blockchain-based currencies, and AI-driven systems that allowed people to govern themselves without the need for middlemen. The global decentralized network wasn't just a piece of software. It was the beating heart of this movement, creating new economic models, new ways of communicating, and new ways of living. Elon Musk had become one of the key figures in the movement, traveling the world to meet with local leaders, activists, and innovators. He was building bridges between the new dawn and communities that had long been overlooked by the system. People don't want just an alternative system. They want a better one, Kimball told Elon during one of their late-night discussions. We've got the infrastructure, we've got the technology, but the next step is going to be about culture, teaching people how to live in a world where they are no longer bound by the old power structures. Elon nodded thoughtfully. We need to show them that the decentralized world isn't just about survival. It's about thriving. It's about giving people the freedom to build, to create, to choose. As the world slowly adapted to the new reality, Elon's attention turned inward. The global decentralized network was flourishing, but there were still so many unknowns. What did the future hold for the next generation? How could humanity ensure that the ideals of equality, transparency, and sustainability didn't get lost in the process? In the months following the launch, the SpaceX Mars mission entered a new phase. For years, Elon had seen space as the ultimate frontier for humanity, a place where the future of civilization could be shaped away from the grips of the old powers. With Mars now within reach, his vision for a multi-planetary species seemed more urgent than ever. But it was no longer just about escaping Earth's troubles. As Elon often said, it's about leaving behind the systems of control and greed that have governed us for so long. The long-term goal was still to make humanity a multi-planetary species, but now, Elon and his team were looking at space not as an escape but as a new beginning. They were planning the infrastructure for colonies on Mars, sustainable, self-sufficient communities powered by renewable energy, utilizing resources from the planet itself. A society that would be a true test of the decentralized model in action. Space is the next step, Elon said in a meeting with his leadership team. But it's more than that. It's a place where we can get it right, where we can start fresh. We have a chance to prove that our ideas can work on a larger scale, and we will. However, Elon wasn't blind to the challenges ahead. As much as the global decentralized network had taken hold on Earth, the forces of the old world were regrouping. Victor Hale and his allies hadn't disappeared. They were no longer in control, but they were still powerful, still willing to use any means necessary to fight back. Their influence wasn't gone. It was merely underground. Elon knew the next phase would require vigilance and resilience. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about building a new world from the ground up, brick by brick, code by code, idea by idea. Months passed. The world began to rebuild itself in fits and starts, but Elon knew that the future could not be shaped by technology alone. The people, the citizens of the world, had to be ready. They had to be prepared to take on the responsibility that came with the freedoms the new system offered. Elon had always believed that technology was a tool for empowerment, but now he saw it as a key to awareness. The world he had dreamed of was within reach, but it was going to take more than technological innovations to make it a reality. The true challenge was changing the human mindset. How could humanity learn to live in a world where technology worked for everyone, not just the privileged few? How could it create an economy that didn't depend on exploitation? And how could it build societies where compassion and cooperation were the driving forces, not profit and power? As Elon stared out the window, watching the lights flicker on across the city, he was struck by the gravity of the road ahead. The road to a new world was not a straight line. It was messy, filled with uncertainty, and riddled with setbacks. But it was also possible. He thought of the people who had believed in him, who had followed his lead despite the overwhelming odds. The thousands of innovators, activists, and dreamers who had come together to bring the vision to life. For the first time in a long while, Elon allowed himself a moment of quiet hope. The global decentralized network had sparked a revolution, but that revolution wasn't just about taking down the old powers. It was about transforming the way people thought about themselves and their place in the world. It was about realizing that humanity was more than just a collection of individuals. It was a collective organism, one that could achieve far more when it was united, when it was free. Elon smiled, standing up and walking to the window. The sun had set, but the city below was alive, pulsing with energy, hope, and potential. He knew that his work wasn't done, but that the world was finally on the right path. The final chapter of Elon Musk's story wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new era, one where technology, humanity, and consciousness would all intertwine. The old systems had been broken down, but now it was time to build something greater. A world where everyone had the power to choose their future. A world where people worked together, not against each other. A world where freedom, transparency, and sustainability weren't just ideals. They were the foundation of everything. And as Elon Musk looked out over the horizon, he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The road ahead was not a solitary journey. It was a shared one. Together, humanity would chart the course of the future. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?